Good morning, all of you. All right, so yesterday we stopped after having talked till the point on why India did not choose a pure socialist or a pure capitalist economy. Today we'll begin with further things. So, in January 1950, Planning Commission was established. Planning Commission was established, and this was Central Planning Commission. It was established by central government, and it was decided that Planning Commission will be responsible, it will be responsible for development of 5-year plans. It will be responsible for development planning. That is how India will develop over 5 years. Resource allocation and choice of allocation of central schemes, the central government schemes in the state. Choice of allocation of central schemes, that is the central government schemes in the states. That is the choice of central schemes. For example, when you talk about centrally sponsored schemes and central sector schemes, all right, always remember that when we say central schemes are of two types. One can be centrally sponsored schemes. In centrally sponsored schemes, expenditure on project is shared between central and state government. Such schemes are called centrally sponsored schemes. Expenditure on the project will be shared between central government and state government. Right? Such schemes will be called centrally sponsored schemes. And that sharing can be in any ratio. It can be 50-50, 60-40, 70-30, any ratio that's determined by the central government. But the scheme has a sharing ratio between central government and state government. And the other type of central scheme is central sector scheme. In central sector schemes, whenever you see any scheme as a central sector scheme, in this case, entire expenditure is done by central government. Entire expenditure is done by central government. That is a central sector scheme. So a central sector scheme means all 100% money will be given by central government. A centrally sponsored scheme means that some part of the expenditure will also be done by the state government. And Planning Commission in those days was made responsible to allocate both central sector scheme and centrally sponsored scheme to the state governments. So Planning Commission was established in January 1950, and their job was to plan for development planning over 5 years horizon, resource allocation, and choice of allocation of central schemes. All this was required to be done by the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission was headed by Deputy Chairman of Planning Commission, and the official head was the Prime Minister of the country, who was considered the Chairman of Planning Commission. All right, so the notified head would be Deputy Chairman of Planning Commission, but ex officio head would be the Prime Minister of the country as the Chairman of the Planning Commission. That is how it was established. Again, it was a copy from Soviet model because we were quite excited by the Soviets. We had seen Soviets becoming a superpower in 30 odd years. So we had thought that, okay, why not India also try the same mechanisms, go for development planning with public sector dominance, and maybe we can also be a power to reckon with in the next maybe 20, 30 years. So that was the plan in those days, that okay, let India grow by planning. Planning means what? The planning commission will choose how the resources will be used, which commodities will be produced, where they will be produced, and how they will be allocated to other places of the country. So everything would be determined by planning commission, and public sector enterprises will play a big role in achieving those targets. So we started growing through the 5-year plans, and the first 5-year plan was 1951 to 1956. So we begin today's story with that. First 5-year plan, 1951 to 1956. This first 5-year plan was based on Harrod-Dormer model of growth. Again, you don't have to do any research on this model. Only remember the name of this model from prelims point of view. So it was based on Harrod-Dormer model of growth. Based on Harrod-Dormer model of growth. Now see, when we talk on this, you write down few more things, and Harrod-Dormer model is something that we did the other day, if you recall, yesterday rather, when we talked about the virtuous cycle of growth. Alright, day before yesterday, that is, that virtuous cycle of growth. That is how when you improve on savings, then increase in savings will contribute to investment, and that will contribute to GDP growth. So that was based on Harrod-Dormer's idea. So in the same thing you write, the model suggested increasing savings. The model suggested increasing savings to increase growth rate, in the economy, full stop. The plan period focused on agriculture, industrial diversification, and infrastructure development. So agriculture, industrial diversification, and infrastructure development. These were the 3 focal points of the plan period. That is where they were focusing upon. You write in the same thing, the plan targeted growth rate of 2.1% per annum, and achieved slightly more than 4% per annum. I repeat, the plan targeted a growth rate of 2.1% per annum and achieved slightly more than 4% per annum. I'll tell you what was the idea. I told you yesterday that from 1900 to 1947, we had grown at 0.7% per annum. So even 2.1% looked heroic. That if you could grow above 2%, then that is some achievement. But the British period was different from when we became independent. As we became independent, we started focusing on those areas where we could grow better. So there were two main economic reasons due to which we grew fast post-independence, especially in the first 5-year plan. One was that industrialization happened at a very rapid pace, mainly because the government invested a lot of money. And the second was consumption picked up at a very fast pace, because after the British, the restriction on consumption that the British system had imposed, I'll tell you what I mean by that restriction. It's called release of pent up demand, P-E-N-T-U-P, pent up. अब ये pent up demand क्या है? Pent up demand का मतलब होता है when demand is restricted by external factors. Whenever you see the word pent up demand, I'll make you write all this. Pent up demand is when demand is restricted by external factors. Alright, that is called pent up demand. What were these external factors in the context of, say, 1951 or area before 1951? The external factors were, A, the Britishers did not allow Indians to consume many commodities because they wanted to make us feel inferior. So they would say Indians are not allowed to consume these commodities. And B, equally importantly, there was a Swadeshi and boycott movement going on. And since there was a Swadeshi and boycott movement going on, many Indians who otherwise wanted to consume a commodity would not consume it because they were participating in Swadeshi and didn't want to help the British by buying their products. Post-independence, both these problems were gone. Alright, and that meant that there was tremendous increase in consumption in India, and that resulted in very high growth in the economy. If you recall, when we discussed GDP, I told you it is C plus I plus G plus NX. So if C starts rising, consumption starts rising at a fast pace, you have an increase in GDP at a fast pace. Alright, so that is the basic idea that started happening. So government expenditure led to high industrialization and consumption demand picked up. मैं फिर रिपीट कर रहा हूँ, जब मैं कंजम्पशन डिमांड, पेंट अप डिमांड की बात करता हूँ, ये वो डिमांड है जो किसी बाहर के फैक्टर की वजह से रुका हुआ रहता है, जिस पे लोगों का कंट्रोल नहीं है. Say for example, right now you guys are not working, so it is possible many times you will see something in the market and decide the day I start working, I will buy it. That is your pent up demand. Alright, so the day you start earning, you will release it and buy much more than your average demand in the initial days of your earnings. And then you will again come down and you will kind of get it back to the average level. But that is the pent up demand released. Alright, that is the basic idea. So this is about release of pent up demand that we bring across when we talk about the whole point of India's growth. So industrial growth and release of pent-up demand led to consumption increase. There was one more factor that contributed to some extent to our percentage growth, that is called the impact of base effect. This you will read even now in newspapers at times. This base effect is on which base are you calculating growth. That is called base effect. Alright, आप किस बेस पे अपने ग्रोथ को कैलकुलेट कर रहे हैं, वो होता है बेस इफेक्ट. मैं एग्जांपल देता हूं. Think like this, take an example, that when you talk about base effect, it works like this. Suppose there is, if we take GDP and if we take years, so year 1 say GDP is 100, year 2 GDP is 110, say year 3 GDP is 120. Now, if I measure growth of GDP, in year 2, it increased by 10 units from 100 units. So the growth rate is 10%. I'm sure that's easy for you. So between first and second year, GDP increased by 10 units from the base of 100 units, growth rate 10%. Between second and third year, GDP again increases by 10 units. Between second and third year, GDP again increases by 10 units, but this time on a base of 110 units. And that means that now if you calculate growth, you will get 9.1%. So even though GDP increased by 10 units in both these cases, even though GDP increased by 10 units, in both these cases, growth rate is higher here because of low base effect. Do I believe all of us are clear on this? So whenever you hear the word low base effect, high base effect, that kind of a thing, always think in terms of from what level did the growth happen. For example, inflation is expected to come down this year because last year already inflation was very high, so there is a high base effect. Do I believe I reach you on that? So that is the idea of base effect. Whenever you read in newspapers that this growth is high, this growth is low, this percentage changes more, that is because of the base effect on which you are considering it. So remember, we were a relatively poor economy in 1947 or thereafter. So any amount of growth in percentage terms took us to a higher level. Now that is not to take away from the policy making. Even Britishers had a low base effect, but still India did not grow even 1%. So I'm not saying at all that policies were not responsible. Policies were contributing to growth, but then again I repeat, base effect has its own role. If somebody says India grew at 10% in 2008, we did, but then in 2008 we were a $1 trillion economy. So if we grew 10%, we were adding $100 billion. Understand like that. If somebody says India grows 7% in 2023, now we are a $3 trillion economy. If we grow 7% also, we are adding $210 billion. So even though we added more than twice of what we did in 2008, the percentage value looks less because of now having a high base effect. That is why, if somebody says, okay, how fast India can grow? Well, this is the time, I'm talking 2020s, maybe initial years of 30s, when we have still a lesser base, $3 trillion, $2 trillion, $4 trillion, when we can still add more and keep growing at 7-8%. Once we become a $5 trillion, $6 trillion, $7 trillion economy, growing at 7%, 8%, 10% will be that much more difficult. Do I believe you understand this? Like look at Chinese today. Now Chinese are an $18 trillion economy. So now if they have to grow say 10%, they will have to add $1.8 trillion. That's quite tough to do. So that is why you will see that now they're growing at 4%, 3.5%, and some people in our media start rejoicing it. I understand they get paid for that look, China is slowing down and India is growing faster, so it's a time when India can catch up. That's a little exaggeration. We should keep it a reality check over there. Chinese slowdown, even at 4%, is adding $720 billion. If today India needs to add $720 billion, we will have to grow at 24%, which definitely we are not growing. So we are not catching up. You understand that? My growth rate can be faster than that of the Chinese, but at the moment we are not nowhere near to catching them up. Because every year the gap is widening. Understand that. I still remember very well, 5 years back, 6 years back, when I would teach in my classrooms, I would say China is a $12 trillion economy, $13 trillion economy, and India is a $2 trillion economy. Now in the last 6-7 years, we have added $1.3 trillion more, but the Chinese have added $5 trillion more. So the gap is widening between us and them. And remember, there comes a point when we can become irrelevant to them. And that point we should not reach. That is the point. That is why India has to focus on high growth. How we will do that, I'll teach you that hopefully by day after tomorrow. But keep this in mind that India has to focus on high growth, and hence reforms are important in Indian context. Otherwise, we are nowhere near. You think of it, the way we have left Pakistan way behind in the rear view mirror. Rear view mirror में पीछे छोड़ना क्या होता है कि आपकी गाड़ी इतनी आगे निकल गई कि पीछे वाली गाड़ी अब दिखती भी नहीं है. So when your car gets ahead to that extent that the previous car is not even visible, you have left them in the rear view mirror. Pakistan used to be a $75 billion economy, $75 billion in 1991. India in those days used to be $220 billion economy. So Pakistan's size was 1/3 of India, and Pakistan's population was much lesser, which meant in per capita income terms, Pakistan did better than us. Their per capita income was higher than India's in 1991. Over last 30 years, we have grown quite fast. They have been busy exporting terrorism, etc. So they didn't grow that good. And that means that over 30 years, by the time we reach 2023, we are a $3.3 trillion economy and they are $275 billion. Now we are around 12 times bigger than them. And in per capita income also almost double than them, almost, not exactly. And that means they're becoming irrelevant to us. That comparison doesn't matter anymore. You understand that? So that is something we have to be careful about, that the Chinese should not do the same to us. What we have been doing to Pakistan. That economies which were seemingly similar to each other suddenly have a vast difference among them. So that is where what I wanted to highlight, that base effect has its own impact on growth measurement, any percentage change measurement. Inflation is also what? Inflation is a percentage change measurement of price. How much is the growth of price compared to last year? So again, if price already increased high last year, this year, even if the price increases by same amount, the percentage will look lesser. Do I believe you understand the whole idea? So I gave you 3 reasons why India grew faster compared to what it was growing earlier. 1, government expenditure on industries. 2nd, release of pent-up demand. Pent-up means this, P-E-N-T-U-P. In fact, I can give you another example of pent-up demand to make you understand it even more easily. Demand increase immediately post-COVID pandemic. If you recall, first wave. In the first wave of COVID pandemic, we went for a very strict lockdown. And India remained in a comparatively strict lockdown for almost 5-6 months, from April till almost September. And it was only in September, October that things were again relaxed entirely. And that was the festival season also. And suddenly demand picked up more than proportionately, because for 6 months people were not buying anything. That did not mean they didn't have any money at all, but since there was a lockdown, they were not buying anything. So as soon as the lockdown was removed, pent-up demand became higher. All right, so that is the idea of release of pent-up demand. So pent-up demand means demand which has been kept restricted due to any external factor. External factor means factor beyond my कंट्रोल. तो जब भी ये शब्द सुनो पेंट अप डिमांड, इसका मतलब होता है वो डिमांड जो किसी बाहरी कारण से रुका हुआ हो. बाहरी कारण मतलब जो मेरे देश से रिलेटेड नहीं है सीधा, कुछ और कारण रहे जो अर्थव्यवस्था से बाहर है, उनसे रिलेटेड हो. Do I believe you understand the idea of pent up demand? All right. So you take this down, you write, and just one clarification. I got a message from one of you yesterday saying that, sir, we don't understand Hindi. You don't need to. Whatever I speak in Hindi, either I have already spoken it in English or I repeat it in English. So you just keep focusing on what I talk in English. So in case you don't get something that I talk in Hindi, don't worry at all. You don't need to understand Hindi to understand this classroom. Just thought I'll clarify to all of you, those of you who have a FOMO, that he must have said something extra in Hindi. Those friends of yours who understand both the language, confirm it from them. That did sir speak anything extra in Hindi? I don't. In general also, my linguistic term is English. So don't worry at all. It's English that comes naturally to me when I'm teaching. Rather, it becomes a little difficult talking in Hindi. In fact, that is why I have already withdrawn from next ISS program of Hindi medium. I said I'll not be comfortable. I don't communicate well in Hindi. Hindi आती है तो मुझे college days याद आने लगते हैं. I behave like a college person because we used to talk like that in our college to our friends. So don't worry at all. I just got a message from one of you, so I just thought I'll clarify if you are sitting here right now. All right. Let's see this then. When we talk about, so you write this first. You write within that. There were Okay, that's a good question that you asked me. So the question I'm answering is that Harrod-Domar model talked about saving and investment, and did we have enough savings at the time of investment, at the time of independence, that we could have planned it? So the answer is that we didn't have savings at that time as much, but that was the model that, okay, then plan on mobilizing savings from within the country. So if you would see, after independence, we were doing many things, like post office savings banks were established to mobilize small savings from rural areas, etc. LIC was established to mobilize savings through life insurance that people will take. SBI was established to mobilize savings through a public sector bank. So that was the effort. That savings are less at the moment, but if we can mobilize them from people who are having it, then we can increase savings, because without increasing savings, how do you increase investment? All right, that was the idea. All right, and in fact, if you ask me, India is doing much better when it comes to savings, because we are not a very rich country, but still we save more than 30% of our GDP. That's quite an achievement at our level of GDP. Normally countries don't do that. No, now, I'm saying now. At that time we were saving 1947, we were saving 5% of GDP. But with all the efforts I told you, mobilization of savings, within 20 years, by 1967, we had increased it to 14% of GDP. So savings rate were mobilized heavily in India to promote investment. All right. You write then, reasons for faster growth. Reasons for faster growth of GDP. This is reasons in the first 5-year plan. We are still in the first 5-year plan. I'm giving you the reasons for faster growth of GDP, which I was discussing with you. You write first point. So reasons for faster growth of GDP. High increase in industrialization. High increase in industrialization. Mainly based on, after a comma, mainly based on government expenditure. High increase in industrialization, comma, mainly based on government expenditure. Then second, release of pent-up demand. Release of pent-up demand. In a bracket you write, demand restricted by external factors. Demand restricted by external factors. Close the bracket. Release of pent-up demand due to independence, increased consumption to a great extent. Increased consumption to a great extent. All right, that was another thing, that release of pent-up demand, increased consumption to a great extent. And third, you write, low base effect. Low base effect also contributed to high growth. I hope pent up demand and base effect is clear for everyone? You understand the meaning? All right. Then you take the next thing up, you write second 5-year plan. Second 5-year plan. This second 5-year plan was 1956 to 1961. Second 5-year plan, 1956 to 1961, and this is regarded as one of the most important 5-year plans of India. Most important 5-year plans of India till 1991. Alright, this is regarded as one of the most important 5-year plans of India till 1991, because most of the 5-year plans of India hereafter were based on second 5-year plan. The future plans that were made were heavily based on this. This was called Mahalanobis model. This was called Mahalanobis model in the name of Professor Mahalanobis. Okay, so you asked me to explain base effect again. Base effect implies that when you calculate growth on a lower base, mind you, when you are calculating growth, I deliberately took an example where both of the times output increased by 10 units, but once the base of growth was lesser, 100, and that meant your growth rate came out higher compared to the other time when the base was higher. So base effect is from which point does your growth happen, and that decides whether it will be higher or lesser. All right, coming to this, it's like this. Think like this always. If your weight falls by, say you are a 60 kg person, and if your weight falls by 10 kg, it can be catastrophic for you because your weight is showing a decline of 20%. You understand that? Almost 20%, 17%. I am a 95 kg person. If my weight falls by 10%, that will be a welcome change. Because the base effect is high, I will lose hardly 10% of my body weight, which is good and healthy for me. So again, both of ours weight fell by 10 kg, but yours changed by 20% or 18%, 17%, mine by say 11%. Why? Because the base on which we calculated the change was different. So base effect is that whether the base is large, then any change will look small in percentage term. And if the base is small, then any change will look large in percentage terms. All right, that is the idea. If you recall, post-COVID pandemic in 2020-21, during COVID pandemic, we had a negative GDP growth. We had recession. Then 2021-22, Indian economy grew at 9%. Now that was a lot because of low base effect. That previous year was a negative GDP growth year. So obviously the current year, it looked higher because of GDP having gone down. This year's GDP growth, when we recorded 7.2%, is a good performance because it is coming on an already higher base of 9% last year. Do I believe you understand the idea? So this is the basic thing behind a base effect talk that we do. All right, that कि पिछले साल की हालत क्या थी, उसके कंपैरिजन में अब इस साल कहाँ हो. तो अगर पिछले साल कम पे थे तो अपने आप ही थोड़ा सा भी चेंज आएगा तो इस साल ज्यादा परसेंटेज दिखेगा. That is the idea of a base effect, that you make your understanding based on where you were last year and compared to that where you are this year. But important thing is, if last year you were at a very low level, then any change this year will look, or any positive change this year will look higher in percentage terms. If last year you were at a very high level, then any change this year will look low in percentage term. And all that is called base effect. All right, now see, Mahalanobis model had some typical features, and they are important because, again I repeat, they designed India's growth for the next 35 years. All right, so you write there main features, and within that you write point 1. Main features, and within that you write point 1. Growth was targeted Growth was targeted through large scale industries. Growth was targeted through large scale industries and capital intensive technology. Large scale industries and capital intensive technology. That was one thing that was done, that growth would be targeted through large scale industries and through capital intensive technology. Large scale industries means big industries with a lot of machines and using and producing on a very large scale, producing in tons. And capital intensive means which uses more machines than workers. Now in those days India did not have a choice. Like if somebody would have said why we did not choose labor intensive technology, because we didn't have a choice. There was no well developed labor intensive technology. Technology was developed mostly in Europe, in United States, in Soviet Union, and all these places were places with low population. So there was hardly a place where technology was developed labor intensive. So India didn't have a choice. If we had to grow fast, we had to adopt capital intensive technology. All right. तो अगर कभी भी मन में ये आए कि भारत ने लेबर इंटेंसिव टेक्नोलॉजी क्यों नहीं चुना, क्योंकि चॉइस नहीं था. जो टेक्नोलॉजी उपलब्ध थी वो कैपिटल इंटेंसिव थी. Another thing that can come to your mind is that why did we go for large scale industrialization? Why not small scale? We went for large scale industrialization because we had seen the countries developing like that. We had seen Soviet Union going for large scale industrialization, growing fast. We had seen United States going for large scale industrialization, growing fast. Japan did the same. So we thought, okay, if India also goes for large scale industrialization at a very fast pace, then maybe in 10-15 years India will grow very fast, and then we can go back and focus on more things after we have become gradually rich enough. So what was the focus of our growth process? The idea was trickle down. That let growth happen first, and as growth happens, people can be uplifted. All right, that was the basic idea. Second point, you write, public sector enterprise. Public sector means enterprises controlled by the government. जब भी आप ये शब्द सुनो, public sector, मतलब सरकारी कंपनी की बात हो रही है. Alright, so whenever we talk about public sector, these are enterprises controlled by the government. So you write, public sector enterprises were given the role of commanding heights, and put commanding heights within inverted comma. That is, all important industries were kept under the control of public sector. All important industries were kept under the control of public sector. So I'll tell you what I mean by that. Public sector will control road, railways, airways, waterways. Public sector would control electrification. Public sector would control communication like post, telecom, and so on. Public sector would control important minerals like iron ore, coal, and so on. Public sector would control important refineries like petroleum refineries, copper smelting, aluminium smelting, so metals, etc. in public sector control. And public sector would control all important raw materials. All right, which implied that public sector could also influence the choice of private sector. And that is why the name commanding heights. Give public sector all the important industries so that they can command what can be done even by the private sector. Public sector को सारे important industry दे दो, जैसे road, railway, say airways, waterways, electricity, generation, distribution, everything, then communication, post and telegraph, telecom and so on, then all important raw materials like coal, iron ore, petroleum products. So if public sector has control on all these things, then obviously public sector can also control what the private sector will choose to do. And that is why it was said that they are being given a role of commanding height, that they are given such a height in the economy from where they can command everybody else. Do I believe you understand this? All right, so in the same thing you continue. You wrote all important industries. I mean, the of public sector, you write, this was done with objectives of now objectives of, I'm starting a debate here, and this debate will continue over next 2-3 days. We are starting with role of public sector in the economy, and then we will talk about the challenges that public sector has faced in India, the problems we have seen, and then the reforms in public sector. That is how we will develop the debate. So first thing first, when we say role of public sector in India, what was the objective? Why was public sector established? All right, so the objectives were, and you write, take it as A, B, C, D, or 1, 2, 3, 4. So objectives of, first, keeping price under control. Keeping price under control. It was thought that public sector will supply things at a cheaper rate, and that will force private sector also to supply at a cheaper rate. So keeping price under control, comma, or second, then providing more employment How do you provide more employment? By hiring more people. That's very obvious. But what's the best way to hire more people? So by expanding, actually, growing. If I grow as a company, if I become efficient as a company, if I expand as a company, I will automatically expand job opportunities. In India, we took it the other way around. We said, oh, employment opportunities, let's overstaff. So if 2 people are needed, keep 5 people. But public sector company hai na, langar nahi chala rahe. It's not a charity going on that you will keep 5 people in place of 2 and try justifying it by saying, no, it's the job of the public sector to give jobs. Well, it is the work of public sector to give jobs, but that job should be created by efficiency and growth rather than overstaffing and making all of them irrelevant. Because when you are overstaffed, then everybody thinks somebody else will do the work. And the dangerous thing today is it has become a cultural thing in India. That is the dangerous part. That people are sometimes planning to join public sector. I hope you are not. So that there is less work to do. That's cheating on the country. How can there be less work to do in a country like India for government? Government has a lot of work to do. But imagine if government servants join government assuming there is less work I will do once I am in the government. That's a dangerous proposition, and that is why government works inefficiently in our country. Otherwise, imagine 75 years of our independence now, 76th year, we can't even blame the British for waterlogging in a capital city of our country. अभी भी क्या बोले, अंग्रेज करके गए ऐसा? नेहरू जी को तो blame कर ही देते हैं हम लोग. Some cases we say Pandit Nehru is responsible. For all the problems of today, also waterlogging in Delhi, Pandit Nehru is responsible. So this is sheer inefficiency of our municipal corporation. Understand that. And that's bad functioning of public sector, where responsibilities are not fixed. People are in the habit of not working. I repeat again, और मेरे हिसाब से तो देशद्रोह है ये. People should be tried for treason. That you are taking public money, taking salary from the people, and willing not to work. And unfortunately, I see this disease top to bottom. That should be something which we should. I'm not saying everyone. So don't generalize me. I'm saying, but on an average, we see less efficient work from public sector, while their job was to create more employment. How do you keep price in control? How do you do that? I am running a GS course. You might have seen all that in the, all those social media platforms run by Next IAS. So I'm running a GS course for economics questions from 2013 to 2023. 23 तो आया नहीं अभी. Mains examination, and I put a charge of 500 rupees on it. That also I was willing to take it for free, but then somebody correctly told me that if you give it for free, then people will take it for free and nobody will understand the value. So put a nominal charge so that people feel that something has been paid and they use these classes. Now it's an extensive class, 20 odd classes that I am taking in that, discussing all questions from 2013 to 22 of previous year, plus 40 extra questions of current affairs. For a very low price, 500, which doesn't even take out the cost of production that Next IAS and I have on that. But how can I do it? Because I am earning money by all the fee that you have paid. So I can do something for the welfare of the students only when I can earn sufficiently from somewhere else. Understand that. I told you in the first class itself, there is no free lunch. And as very well said by Carl Schwab, if something is for free to you, then it means you are the product. That is what social media is about. That when they say, oh, take it from us and take it for free. Take it for free because you are the product. Your data set is with them. You are downloading an app to take a class for free. And what are you putting into that? Your phone book, we would need to know, allowed. We would need to see your photos, allowed. We would need to see your call record also, allowed. Please, everything, give me something for free. You are the product. They know all the data about you now. Wherever you are going, what you are doing, and be careful what you are watching on your searches. Everything somebody else is also watching. And then we write big essays on privacy bill. We are willing to compromise our privacy for something for free, or willing to compromise ethics. At your age, it may not be clear exactly. Sometimes things are blurred. But imagine, what right will you have morally and ethically to curb corruption if you read your newspaper on Telegram without paying for it? You're doing a copyright violation. If you watch a plagiarized video, मैंने ethics का वीडियो देखा टेलीग्राम पे, उसमें सिखा रहे थे कैसे गलत होता है चोरी करना, और मैं चोरी करके ही देख रहा था, बड़ा मजा आ रहा. I was actually enjoying it. I was getting it for free and they were teaching us how it should not be. You should not take things for free. It is cheating. Imagine, we don't even notice it sometimes that we are cheating. That means we are no different from all those people whom we criticized, like Vijay Mallya or Nirav Modi. They got an opportunity of 10,000 crore. They did 10,000 crore. We get an opportunity of a video and a newspaper. We do that. ये तो मौका मिलने की बात है. जिस दिन मौका लग जाएगा 1,000 करोड़ कहेंगे, छोड़ो, कुछ ना कुछ जस्टिफिकेशन दे देंगे उसका भी. We will justify that theft also, the way we justify the theft on Telegram and video plagiarization. And believe me, you will have several people around you doing it imputively. That is something that is value judgment thing that you need to make sure the society grows up better on, because nothing is for free. You know why I told you this? So if public sector has to do better and charge a low price, what does public sector need to do? Public sector needs to then make sure that they become efficient enough by cost cutting through which they can charge low price. Understand that. So if I become efficient through cost cutting, there will be a low price on that. So this is something we need to understand, that when objectives were set, low price, high employment, it was not that, okay, keep low price and keep running into loss and go bust one day. ये ऑब्जेक्टिव थोड़ी था कि अच्छा लो प्राइस रखते रहो, नुकसान में जाते रहो, एक दिन दिवालिया हो जाना, हम पब्लिक के पैसे पे तुम्हें चलाएंगे, भले ही तुम स्कूटर क्यों ना बना रहे हो. This is the challenge that we have. The low price, become efficient, be cost effective, and charge a low price, expand well, get more business, and employ more people. That was the objective. We turned the whole logic upside down. And we said, no, public sector का तो काम ही है कम में बेचना. कैसे? If they're selling at a low price and running into losses, somewhere it's like robbing Peter to pay Paul. Money is going out of your pocket only, which you may not be realizing at that point of time. Because government doesn't run on its own money. Government runs on our money only. They don't get money from somewhere external. And they don't earn. So they will run on our money. So if we think that no, let public sector sell at low price, let this be free for me, let that be free for me. Nothing is free for you. You are losing something else to get something else for free. So maybe you can keep your Wi-Fi free where the drainage system is bad. Maybe you can keep your electricity free where policing will be bad. So take things for free, but something else will be bad around you. So it's about putting a check on the government that, look, give me the essentials. That's important. Have we ever asked, why do we need an RO facility in a country like ours? Why can't we give clean water to all of us? ये कोई बहुत बड़ा डिमांड थोड़ी है कि साफ पीने का पानी सबके लिए उपलब्ध हो. Clean drinking water for everyone. We don't even ask for it now. Now rather, when we go to some place, say even a restaurant, and they ask us, do you need a mineral water or will you take regular water? Many of us ask them, do you use RO? If you use RO, then we take a regular water. So no responsibility on the government mechanism to give us water which will be treated. But they claim we are giving you free electricity and we are giving you free water supply. That is the danger when it comes to both inclusive growth and efficiency in development. You understand that? So this is the challenge to keep in mind. If somebody says something is for free, always keep it in your mind, nothing is for free. It may seemingly look like for free, but something else is being compromised to give you this for free. That's always the case. So again I repeat, public sector was created for efficiency. In those days, public sector was supposed to be a role model. Imagine if government schools start teaching very well. We will not need private schools for at least the middle class individuals. I'm not saying private schools will close down. But there will be many middle class people who can send their children to government schools then, and they will save a lot of money that they have to spend in sending their children to private schools otherwise. And that will be education for all. Then there is no problem in it. But we try achieving targets. I'll tell you something interesting about Delhi government that it does. So Delhi government claims that Delhi government schools are functioning better than many private schools. Look at our 10th standard result and look at our 12th standard result. But what do? All children who are weak are failed in their 9th standard itself. And they won't let them pass. So obviously the ones who reach the 10th standard are actually those who are already better children. And that means the result will be good. That's called quantitative achievement. कि जो बच्चे कमजोर हैं उनको मजबूत मत बनाओ, उनको 2 साल 3 साल फेल कर दो, वो वैसे भी गरीब घर से आ रहे हैं, वो पढ़ाई छोड़ के कोई और काम में लग जाएंगे. So you just keep failing them for 2-3 years. They will leave studies. Somebody will become an electrician, somebody will become a carpenter, somebody will become a plumber by taking small trainings here and there, and they will leave education. And then you bring all the good ones into 10th standard, let them take the board exam, let them perform well and say, look how great we are teaching. Well, I will be teaching great if I can do something good for the lowest common denominator of my classroom. Understand that. Those among you who are good enough are automatically good enough. So I can always add value to you But my real importance lies when I'm adding value to even those who didn't understand anything and started understanding few things with the teacher concerned. We don't take those challenges. I used to joke about it even when I was in the previous institute, and even today I joke about it, that when we claim that all these toppers were like these many toppers from our institute, we should just put a denominator in it that how many did we teach. ये मजाक में हमेशा करता हूं सबके साथ, मेरे यहां से 600 लोग टॉपर निकले और हमने पढ़ाए कितने. उस लैंग्वेज को अगर बदल दे, 300 toppers from my institute out of 2 lakhs that we taught in the last 10 years or 15 years. I used to joke about it at the other institute, that why don't you guys write this also? Because the toppers are not coming, all of them, from the previous batch itself. Somebody studied in 2015, somebody in 16, somebody in 17. They are also topping this exam. Who knows whether they even remember what we taught them or learnt everything afresh. And we are giving ourselves self-importance. So that's about being realistic, that if I am effective, I am efficient, what can I do efficiently? For public sector also, this lesson arises. I deliberately stopped and discussed it with you because public sector, unlike private sector, runs on public money. And anything which runs on public money should be held more responsible when it is working. Because they are not even using their own money. If I'm running a business on my money, I at least have the fear that if this business collapses, my money will go down the drain. But if I'm doing business on your money, then you are in trouble, believe me, if the business collapses. I don't mind. I will get shifted to some other department in my job. That is something we should be careful about when we discuss public sector in any country, especially India. So be careful. I'm just starting the debate and we'll complete the debate over next 2-3 days. But when we say public sector, the objectives have to be kept in mind. So price control, employment opportunities, then you write third, encouraging balanced regional development. Encouraging balanced regional development. Fourth, preventing concentration of wealth in few hands. Preventing concentration of wealth in few hands. You see that? When we say preventing concentration of wealth in few hands, again the idea is that public sectors should use the resources in such a way that necessities are also available. They should use resources in such a way that poor people also get accessibility to resources. That is preventing concentration of wealth in few hands. And then you write another one. To earn profit. To earn profit which can be used to earn profit which can be used for welfare of the people. Now, I'll teach you this in detail, but imagine, I'm giving you a food for thought again. Take Air India. Air India was not keeping price in control. Prices would shoot up the roof and Air India would do nothing. Rather, sometimes Air India would charge the highest on the other routes, even when it was a government company. I'm sure many of you would have experienced it, that Air India airfare would be one of the highest in India rather than the lower end. So Air India was not keeping price in control. Air India is an airline company, so obviously it is a capital intensive company which uses more machine than workers, so it is not creating employment to a great extent. Air India was not contributing anything major to balanced regional growth, because with National Civil Aviation Policy 2016, every airline had to fly remote areas, not only Air India. Air India was not contributing to anything to prevent concentration of wealth in few hands. And Air India was earning massive losses to the tune of 6,000 crore per annum, rather than earning a profit which could be reinvested for welfare of the people. Imagine, then it took us 12 years to decide to sell Air India. Who was it benefiting? And I'm sure poors don't fly in India, so Air India was not benefiting the poors. गरीब लोग उड़ते नहीं हैं भारत में, मतलब हवाई जहाज की बात कर रहा हूँ. So in that case, it's not that Air India was helping the poor, and still it was taking us so much time and so much debate that whether we should privatize Air India or not. Anything which is putting a pressure of 6,000 crore on me, 6,000 crore mind you, put the zeros and you will realize what we are talking, on me, should be run for no reason. And you know, intelligent enough people like Derek O'Brien ji, he was the chairman of Joint Parliamentary Committee set for reforming Air India, says Air India is a jewel in the crown and government should not sell it. This is bordering on madness. He is a well enough learned person to know what he is talking, and he is saying run a company which helps no poor, does nothing much for the system, but costs you 6,000 crore just as the loss of profit. Add to that 52,000 crore of loans that they had accumulated. So that is the food for thought to be kept in mind, that why do we continue with such companies then? Thank God our poors don't know about all this. They would have lynched us. Because when it comes to poors asking us, why don't we have a school in our village? Oh, we don't have money, we are a poor country. Why don't we get clean drinking water facility? अरे गरीब देश है, होगा, धीरे धीरे होगा. It will be slowly done, we are a poor country. Why we don't have hospitals for our children? Oh, it will happen, but we are a poor country. Why is transportation so poorly developed in India? It is gradually going to happen. We are not a very rich country. So in all these cases, we say we don't have money, and hence we can't do it. But we have 6,000 crore per annum to run a behemoth like Air India. White elephant. So understand this, that unless we don't apply logic to the events, we will be stumped here and there. And why was Air India run? Because it was a massive source of money making for few people in the government. Because if I control Air India, I will control the contracts given by Air India. And those contracts become a source of money making for me. If I control Air India, then I will control who sits in Air that Air India waits for me, even if all the passengers are there and I am delayed, if I am an MLA or an MP Sahab. If I control Air India, then I will get free traveling all over India and world in business class in Air India, with the government also paying nothing to them because it is a government company. तो ये मुफ्तखोरी चलती है. तो लगता नहीं पब्लिक सेक्टर को बंद कैसे होने दें. साथ में एक और आसानी है पब्लिक सेक्टर की वजह से, स्टेट गवर्नमेंट तो चैंपियन है उसमें, सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट भी करते हैं, even central government does this, but state governments are champion in it. You can't make somebody a minister, make them the chairman of state public sector enterprise. They will get a house, they will get a bungalow, they will get the capacity to employ people. And the MLA Sahab is very happy that now I am the chairman of this public sector company, which will mean that I can give benefits to my people, win the next elections also, everything on public money. और मुझे और आपको इंजेक्शन लगाते रहेंगे लगातार. पब्लिक सेक्टर इज फॉर वेलफेयर ऑफ द पीपल, पब्लिक सेक्टर इज फॉर वेलफेयर ऑफ द पीपल, पब्लिक सेक्टर इज फॉर वेलफेयर ऑफ द पीपल. सो वी आर इंजेक्टेड so many times that even now when I am saying Air India should be sold out, or it was good we sold it out, some of us might feel no, but public sector is for welfare of the people. This has been injected so many times inside. We can't even understand that it's not for anybody's welfare, it's for few people who are fleecing this country. And I'm not saying all public sector again. So before you generalize things, listen to everything that I teach you in the next 2-3 classes. But I'm saying that Air India specifically, we had no reason to run it, especially after 2011-12, when it was quite clear that the company is going nowhere. We should have sold it then only. But for some reasons, we continued another 8-9 years. So that is my point to you, that we should be careful about which company to run. Imagine, what is government's role making scooter? But we run Scooters India Limited, even today, which runs at a loss of 1100 crore rupees. And the company has not made a scooter since 1994. 1994 से आज तक कोई स्कूटर भी नहीं बनाए हो, नाम है स्कूटर्स इंडिया लिमिटेड, और चले जा रहे हैं. दिस इज गोइंग ऑन. And on our money, I repeat again, we pay tax on petrol, we pay tax on commodities, we pay income tax, and all this money used to run as Scooters India Limited. We should be the ones putting our face against it and saying, look, close this down, sell it off, or privatize it, or close it. Don't misuse our money. This mismanagement is happening tremendously in India. Imagine a bridge is built, I'm talking Bihar, 1700 crore, and then they say there are cracks in the bridge, and there is a faulty structure. So we have decided we will now let the bridge collapse. I understand whose job was gone after that. That should be the larger question, that how come we are making a project of 1700 crore on public money, and then the project develops fault, due to which entire 1700 crore has to be sent into the water, quite literally, you know. And nobody loses the job. देश के 1700 करोड़ का नुकसान हो गया और किसी की नौकरी नहीं जाएगी. सिविल इंजीनियर साहब कौन थे, एग्जीक्यूटिव इंजीनियर कौन थे, जूनियर इंजीनियर कौन थे, मिनिस्टर साहब कौन थे, और ब्यूरोक्रेट इन्वॉल्व कौन थे? इन सबसे सवाल जवाब होना चाहिए, और सबकी नौकरी कम से कम डिसमिसल होनी चाहिए कि देश के 1700 करोड़ कैसे खा गए भाई. और अगर नहीं जाती है नौकरी तो अगली बार लोगों को लगता है अच्छा हमें कुछ नहीं होगा, ये थोड़ा बहुत इंक्वायरी हो जाएगी, शायद 6 महीने का सस्पेंशन हो जाएगा, तो ऐसा करते हैं 200 करोड़ का एक और प्रोजेक्ट में 20 करोड़ और खा लेते हैं. And then the country can keep suffering because the people in their greed will keep taking bribes because they are assured the job will not go away. And then me and you can keep complaining, oh, what's happening in India? Why is the country not developing? When will we become a Vishwaguru? When will India become world leader? How can India become world leader with such people present and the system supporting them? And remember, you can't catch such people unless the system is not reformed. So I'm talking about that. Reform the system and you get things done much better. Do I believe I reach you on this at the moment? We will discuss public sector again, but I'm just trying to put few things in your mind as to how to fix responsibility so that public sector also behaves efficiently. All right. Then you write below that the third reason, a third feature. First feature was capital intensive technology. Second was public sector led growth. Now the third feature. These are features of second 5-year plan. So you write the third feature. Development was based on import substituting industrialization. Development was based on import substituting industrialization. Okay, before I explain this to you, I have an interesting question from one of your friends who says that if we sell at a less price, how do we run into losses? I mean, आपकी simplicity पे मुझे बहुत प्यार आ रहा है. मतलब आप सामने होते तो मैं सच में गले मिलता. मैं तो करप्ट हो गया इकोनॉमिक्स पढ़ाते पढ़ाते. You are so simple that you don't even understand that everything has a cost of production, and the price you charge generates revenue from sale. That revenue is price you charge into quantity sold. Now if price is low, this revenue will be low, and this cost cannot be reduced. If it is not reduced, then this will be higher, and this will enter being a negative term, which is a loss. So in case somebody among you also did not understand what I said, this is the logic of what I said. That if you don't reduce your cost of production and then you try charging a less price, that will mean you will not earn sufficient revenue to earn profit because your costs are there, and because of low price, your revenue is low. And that will mean your loss will be tremendous. All right, that is the idea. All right. Or will it? That is my point. That if it increases, okay. Suppose my price is 10 and demand is 10. My revenue is 100. I reduce the price to 8 and demand rises by 12. My revenue is 96. See that? And imagine if I am a public sector charging 4. Then I will need this to rise to something like 25 to earn the same amount 100. So I want an increase of 150% in my demand if I reduce the price by as much. You see that? So it's not that simple actually. Plus remember, only less price doesn't get you demand. People need quality. BSNL was selling at a less price, but people did not use BSNL, and actually the prices came down in India only when Jio entered. For telecom, I mean. So BSNL was selling things cheap, but then they were selling cheap. तो अगर आप cheap service देंगे तो कौन लेगा आपसे कि जितना देर आपका बफर करेगा इंटरनेट उतने देर में मैं शेव करके आ जाऊं, लौट के आया फिर बफर ही कर रहा है. Nobody takes that internet. और ये भी मुझे एक आश्चर्य लगता है, ये ऐसी आपसे मजाक में शेयर कर रहा हूं, just joking, but I feel very strange that I will not use BSNL or MTNL for that matter if you are in Delhi. I will not be working in MTNL, but if somebody says, okay, then let us sell MTNL. No, how can you do that? This is so sentimental. But economy doesn't run on sentiments, unfortunately, and that also outdated sentiments. अगर आपको नहीं चाहिए कि BSNL सेल हो या MTNL सेल हो, तो तुम तो खरीदो कम से कम MTNL का कनेक्शन. तुम लोगे एयरटेल, तुम लोगे जियो, और कोई बोले MTNL बेच दें, अरे नहीं ऐसा कैसे. ये तो मेरे दादी जी वाली बात हो गई. घर में कूड़ा कबाड़ पड़ा रहता था, पुरानी सामान 100 साल पुराना कुछ, और बाई चांस उनको जाकर बोल दिए शुड वी सेल दिस ऑफ. नो, दिस इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. इट इज सो इंपॉर्टेंट दैट nobody has gone into that room for 5 years. Nobody has used it for over 10-20 years. But it is very important. As soon as you talk about selling it off, no, hang on. This is again ridiculous. What are we? And it's all running on public money. So understand this, that unless we don't focus on basic efficiency, equity will also not be available. The amount of money you are spending in Scooters India में बहुत बोलता हूँ, एयर इंडिया बिकवा दिया ऐसे ही बोल के मैंने. I kept talking about Air India. Finally, the government sold it. Now, Scooters India is on my radar, and I will get it sold. So then you talk about companies like Scooters India, 1100 crore rupees loss. Imagine the other alternative of 1100 crore, the opportunity cost. What can be achieved with 1100 crore rupees? And we are using it to run a company called Scooters India, Bharat Motor Pump, Hindustan Ball Bearing. सरकार का काम है बॉल बियरिंग बनाना, मोटर पंप बनाना, स्कूटर्स इंडिया बनाना. ये अजीब सा लगता है, सुनकर भी आपको लगना चाहिए. सोचो तुम आईएएस बनने वाले हो ना, God willing you become an IAS, we give you your first posting, General Manager Scooters India Limited. And then we give you your second posting, Senior General Manager Bharat Motor Pump. 10 years of your service gone. Another 5 years then as CEO Hindustan Ball Bearings. What will you say? That I did not join this service to manage companies. I joined this service to run the country. That's exactly what I'm trying to explain for the last 10 minutes. Job of the government is to run the country, not to manage companies. When it comes to running the country, like law and order, defense, judiciary, maintaining the civic communities, creating physical infrastructure, there you will see government in many places absent. अब भारत के किसी भी गांव में जाइए, most of the places पे आपको सरकार नहीं मिलेगी. In villages of India, the government is absent. Government is seen on particular days like 15th August, 26th January, when the BDO Sahab or CO Sahab, or in good days DM Sahab can come, cut a ribbon, open some new building and go away after that. Not even a nearby police station, at least in the radius of 4-5 kilometers. People solve things on their own. You need government there. वहां सरकार की जरूरत है, स्कूटर बनाने के लिए नहीं. That was my point. अभी हम थोड़ा सुधर रहे हैं. Till 1992 we even used to have a public sector company called Modern Breads. They used to make breads, they used to sell mixtures and those things. सरकार भजिया तलती थी. Government selling mixtures. This is amazing, no? That government will selling, come eat pakoda, we are making it for you. Why should the government be doing that? So this is my point to you, that government has a specific role in the economy: food security, people security, providing resources to people, educating people, healthcare to people. This is what government should do well. Government does it so well that even government servants don't go to government hospitals. And government servants don't go to government schools. That reflects on what job government is doing. And that is what they should improve. So resources should be channelized in that direction. If you are too skewed up on all the directions, you will end up doing nothing good. 1950s, please understand the context now. This is very important. 1950s, that was not a problem, because in 1950s we had specific reasons why we went for it. We needed it. All right, so 1950s, if somebody says, oh, that means that we did a wrong decision in those days. No, not in 1950s. We didn't want concentration of wealth. We wanted balanced regional growth. We wanted big industries, and government was in a position to do that. The problem happened when we did not realize that role of government should change as private sector becomes stronger and as India becomes more mature as an economy. And it's not that we didn't realize, it was that by then the vested interest groups were quite heavy. So once you create vested interests, those who are gaining out of the corruption in public sector, they won't let that sector close down so easily. And another problem has been the ideological bastion that India created. If you train people for 40-45 years that public sector is for welfare of the people, now it is in the veins and in the blood, no? Now if you try telling them, look, all public sector is not for welfare and some of them can be sold out, the same people say, no, hang on. You injected us all these years saying public sector is for welfare. I can't believe they are not. So understand this. Ideology combined with vested interest groups becomes a big factor that inefficiency of public sector is not being called out. Understand in that manner. मैं ये बिल्कुल नहीं कह रहा हूँ कि public sector को बंद कर देना चाहिए. I'm not saying public sector should be closed down. I'm saying public sector should be held accountable. If they are not doing balanced regional growth, if they are not keeping the prices in control, if they are not creating employment opportunities, if they are not promoting efficiency, if they are not earning enough profit to be spent back into the economy, if they are not doing any of these, then it should be questioned, what are they doing? What are they here for? So that is the point you should start thinking on, rather than thinking that should we close down all the public sector. We don't need to. Because many of them are already doing a good job. Like say a Bharat Heavy Electricals Limited or Steel Authority of India Limited. They're competing and doing well. So they don't need to be closed down. But there are many others who are not doing well, and we should be careful as to why are we continuing with them. That is what I'm trying to teach you, and I will teach you this in more detail as we go ahead. But keep it like that as the building block. शुरुआत में जो हमें दिमाग में बैठाते हैं बात, अच्छा कैसे सोचूंगा इस बात पर, how will I think on these issues? That is the way you should start thinking. That what is the objective that they created. All right. Now I come back to this. When we say import substituting industrialization, this was again something that was not unique to India. It was not that only India was doing it. Many countries of the world, in fact almost 95% countries of the world, were into import substitution. What does import substitution mean? That we will not be buying any commodities from foreign countries. We will rather be producing commodities within our own country and substitute the imports. That is why import substituting industrialization. That kind of industrialization which will replace the importables and make India self-sufficient. Do I believe I reach you on that? making you write it. You write in that. It shows industrialization. It shows, this, I'm sorry, but I again read something from one of your friends online that some of the PSUs like ONGC, etc. are working well. NTPC, ONGC are working well. So maybe the idea of PSU was not bad. The implementation is maybe wrong. You see, that's exactly what I was telling you yesterday when I was telling you the idea of isms. ये नॉर्मल अपॉलॉजी जो अभिनव बोल रहे हैं ऑनलाइन, ये नॉर्मल अपॉलॉजी है उनकी जिनको पब्लिक सेक्टर से दिल से प्यार है. आइडिया बुरा नहीं है, इंप्लीमेंटेशन खराब है. यही तो कह रहा हूं कि इंप्लीमेंटेशन इसलिए खराब है क्योंकि आइडिया जो इंप्लीमेंटेशन का था वही बुरा था. विभास सर meant everything right, it's just that he couldn't teach, but he took the fee to teach us. His intention was not bad at all. So the idea of keeping a teacher like Vibhas sir is not bad. It is just that he is completely inefficient and 3 hours of his class made me write nothing in my mains exam. But his idea was all good. What does that mean? कौन से यूनिवर्स में जाते हैं हम लोग ऐसी बात करते हुए? और मुझे बहुत लोग मिलते हैं ऐसे, एक मेरे साथ भी रहते हैं, वो भी कभी कभी ऐसी बात करते हैं. मैं उनसे भी यही कहता हूं कि भाई यही तो बात तो मैं कह रहा हूं कि इंप्लीमेंट कैसे कर रहे हो. My ideas can be, my intentions can be all great. When you say NTPC is doing well, whom does NTPC compete with? I would have come to this day after tomorrow, but since Abhinav puts a question to me, so I'm answering it. Is NTPC competing with anybody who is generating electricity and transmitting it in India? No, it's a government-created monopoly, tested by putting it in competition. And the same thing applies on, say, an Indian Oil Corporation or an ONGC. Let them compete and prove themselves. That is why I did not name them. I rather named BHEL and SAIL, which compete in the market with other private sectors and still perform better. But you run an NTPC, you run an ONGC, give them a captive market. तुम ही एकमात्र प्रोड्यूस करो, तुम ही बेचो. अगर मैं ही एक कोचिंग इंस्टीट्यूट रहूंगा पूरी दिल्ली में, तो मैं ही प्रॉफिट कमाऊंगा. और तब लोग कहेंगे क्या एफिशिएंट लोग हैं. Understand that. My efficiency is tested when I am asked to compete in the market. If ONGC is such a great company, why aren't they exporting? Now they are exporting with the cheaper Russian oil. And there also, Reliance Petroleum is exporting more than ONGC and Indian Oil Corporation. Well, they do. Even I am a part of certain committees of the government. They don't listen to us. The problem is that. Now, I'm honestly telling you that sometimes, I was joking about it one day in one of the committee meetings, that have you guys appointed us to know what not to do? Because whatever we tell you, you do the opposite sometimes. So we are appointed for that, we don't know. And I've been a member since last 12, 13 years. 2008, I think, was the first time I was invited to a committee. And this is 2023, 14, 15 years हो गए. 2-3 सरकार आ गई इस बीच में. लेकिन चलने का तरीका वही है. You know why? Because of the hubris sometimes that people in the government have. I'm being very honest to you here. Because of the hubris sometimes, the arrogance that they have, that we know all. And the problem is that they don't. They don't know all. That is why they keep chipping and chopping and changing. In 2017, as a member of GST committee on taxation, the committee had suggested to them that don't tax 234 commodities at 28%. It won't be good. Mr. Jaitley was the finance minister. Mr. Adhiya was the finance secretary. He said, no. India is such a poor country and there's so much inequality. Why don't you want us to tax the rich commodities? We will tax it. Okay. The government is supreme. Huzur, my baap, sarkar. Who can challenge them? The academicians have to keep quiet. After that, from 2017 to 2019, they kept changing the tax slab for these commodities. Finally, in 2020, out of those 234 commodities, 206 were taken out of it, and the same 27 commodities remained in 28% tax slab, which we had recommended in 2017. And you know what is the wonderful thing about governance structure? You know what they say? Yeah, we are a very active government. As and when the problem arises, we take immediate steps to control it. And who is the cause of the problem? मैं हथौड़ा लूं, मुंडी तोड़ दूं, फिर इनको हॉस्पिटल ले जाऊं और बोलूं देखो मैं कितना कंपैशनेट टीचर हूं, इनको हॉस्पिटल ले गया मुंडी टूटने पे, और तोड़ा किसने? हाँ, मैंने ही तोड़ दिया। मैं क्या खुश हो गया बोल रहे मैं, तुम बच के रहो भाई। You know, so jokes apart, what I'm trying to tell you is, I create the problem. I have been advised, don't do it. I go ahead and do the problem, and then I take some steps, same steps that I had been advised to do 3 years back, and then I take the credit that I solved it. This is the way we are running at times. So just to answer it, that when you say that are intelligent people not around, there are many intelligent people around. If they are very vehement about something, then they are asked to go back to US and teach. Some of them have gone back already, you know. If they are not very vehement and they keep pushing along, trudging along, कुछ लोग मेरे जैसे ढीठ हैं, मैं मान के चलता हूँ कोई बात नहीं, कुछ भी कर लो, देश छोड़ के तो नहीं जाऊंगा, यहीं टिका रहूंगा, बात तो करता रहूंगा, जो बुद्धि है यहीं अप्लाई करूंगा, डेवलप्ड कंट्री तो इसी को बनाएंगे, you know. So we don't go back, of course, but there are days when you feel that what are we doing? I mean, is my expertise of some use? So that is the problem part, and I don't blame people. You become a bureaucrat, you will experience it firsthand. Suddenly the society starts giving you more than proportionate importance. And that becomes a trouble factor, because then you start feeling that I know all, when sometimes you may not. You know, that is the trouble part. कि आपको more than proportionate importance, आप सोच के देखिए, और आजकल का जमाना तो और खतरनाक हो गया है, सोशल मीडिया बेस्ड ब्यूरोक्रेसी। ये मेरा सजेशन होता है, तुम अगर ट्विटर पे अपना पेज बनाते हो, मुझे उससे आपत्ति नहीं है, आई डोंट ऑब्जेक्ट दैट यू मेक अ ट्विटर पेज वंस यू बिकम एन IAS ऑफिसर, but use that Twitter page or Facebook page to keep sharing the good work that the government is doing, so that people have faith in the system. We become celebrities on that page. That is the trouble part. You know, we will write about our birthdays, me and my better half. And then people are commenting below it, wonderful sir, great sir. Somebody in the third part of the comment, sir, I am in my 4th attempt, please help sir. What kind of things are these? You know, you are a bureaucrat, you are a very busy person, 9:30 to 5:30 आपका काम नहीं है, बहुत busy रहोगे, believe me. It's a very busy job, because there are many bureaucrats in India, many, and thankfully they are there, who are working very heavily and working day in and day out and working silently behind the scenes. They are not on page 3. They are not chased by media. Some of them might be at your place. कुछ आपके घर में होंगे जो सरकारी काम करते होंगे, ऐसे ही behind the scene, रोज सुबह उठ के चुपचाप से काम पे जाते हैं, शाम को लौट कर आते हैं, अपने काम के बारे में आपसे भी ज्यादा बात नहीं करेंगे. You may ask them, what did you do today? Nothing much, it's all going on. They are the real pillars of India, who are holding it intact, because they are working good. So that is the aspect that you need, actually, if you ask me. So that when you say intelligentsia, it's there, and I'm not frustrated at all. I'm still very hopeful, because in many cases they listen, they agree. So it's always a combination. But the problem is, when you are bound by an ideology, it becomes difficult convincing you, because you're already bound by that ideology. You know, that is the problem, if you ask me. Yes. Red tapeism is delays due to bureaucratic control. So, you know, on those files, the red tape is there to bind those files. So from there, this red tapeism came, that the files keep moving in the corridors of power. You understand that? And that delays the whole project thing. That is red tapeism. It has been India's bane for quite some time. भारत के नुकसान का एक बहुत बड़ा कारण है ये red tapeism. क्योंकि कभी-कभी आप सोचो क्या है, तुम मान लो पॉलिटिकल साइंस के एक पर्सन हो, तुम्हारी पढ़ाई लिखाई उसमें हुई, तुम्हें थोड़ी बेसिक ट्रेनिंग दे दी, तुम ब्यूरोक्रेट बन गए, और तुम्हें बना दिया डिस्टिलरी यूनिट का चेयरमैन. अब तुम्हें पता ही नहीं है केमिकल कॉम्पोजिशंस क्या होते हैं, केमिकल फॉर्मूलाज क्या हैं, क्या चीज किससे रिएक्ट करके पता नहीं क्या बन रही है. तुम्हें फाइल दे दिया, लेकिन उसमें सारा कुछ यही सब लिखा हुआ है. बोल रहे हैं इस फाइल को पढ़कर अपनी समझ के साथ कल तक पास कीजिए. कल तक क्या, तुम 2 महीने पास नहीं करोगे. तुम्हें समझ ही नहीं आ रहा क्या लिखा हुआ है इसके अंदर. अब माने कैसे समझ नहीं आ रहा है, क्योंकि दुनिया तो मानती है मैं सर्वज्ञाता हूं. आप समझिए ये बात, that this is a challenge that creates a lot of delays then in decision making. Then you take advice from your juniors and others and so on, but all that delays the things quite a bit. All right. Now there's one more thing I needed to tell you. Import substituting industrialization is different from Atmanirbhar Bharat policy that the government is talking about today. I will make you write it at a later point, but please keep it in mind. Import substituting industrialization implied that India will import nothing except certain essentials like crude oil. Otherwise, everything will be produced within India. But Atmanirbhar Bharat doesn't mean that. Atmanirbhar Bharat means that India will become an important part of global supply chain, so that if we are dependent on others for certain commodities, others also remain dependent on us for few other commodities. You understand that? So that's the difference between that time and this time. I'll just highlight to you in case it still doesn't strike you. In those days, we did not allow FDI, FII, foreign investments that is. Now we are quite bullish. We allow it very freely into India. In those days, we were not export oriented. We didn't focus on export growth. Today, we focus on export growth. And in those days, we were heavily dependent on loans and aid that we would get from World Bank, etc. Today, we avoid taking all that. So there is a lot of difference in India's approach today compared to what India's approach was in earlier days. So import substituting industrialization was self-sufficiency, while Atmanirbhar Bharat is self-reliance. I hope you can keep this much in mind, and I will make you write things on this after I have taught you these topics. So you write in the same point, import substituting industrialization. The objective of this policy, in the same point. I did? Could you? Okay, I'm so sorry. I didn't complete it. So you please complete the line first. It shows industrialization based. It shows industrialization based on on production of those commodities, on production of those commodities which can substitute imports, which can substitute imports by India. Okay. Then you write below that, fourth point, 17 industries, 17 industries were reserved. 17 industries were reserved exclusively for public sector production. That is, private sector was not allowed. Private sector was not allowed to invest and any existing private sector in these industries, any existing private sector in these industries was nationalized. Okay, I'll tell you what I mean by that. Few things first. Always be willing to distinguish between the terms firm and industry. Alright, firm means an individual unit. Like Maruti Suzuki is a firm and automobile is the industry. Alright, so industry will be the larger set. Firm will be the unit in that. Next, IAS is a firm and IAS coaching is the industry, or UPSC coaching is the industry. Alright, so industry will mean a bigger set and individual units in it are called firms. In 1956, we reserved 17 industries exclusively for public sector. What does this exclusive reservation mean? This exclusive reservation means that private sector will not be allowed to make any investment in these industries, and if there existed a private sector, government will take it over. Nationalization means government takes over the private sector. Alright, that was the meaning. Alright, then you write the next point. Do I believe all of you understand that when I use the term balanced regional growth, it means equivalent growth for all regions of the economy? One of your friend asks me online that balanced regional growth means growth of what? Growth of all regions equitably. That is balanced regional growth. Alright, growth of all regions equitably. Okay, you can take the next point. Private sector was given the responsibility. Sorry, that's my phone. All right. My Google Assistant becomes overactive sometimes. All right. So you take this. Could you tell me the line I said? Yeah. Responsibility of developing was given the responsibility of developing consumer goods industry, comma, with labor intensive technology, and at small scale level, So that was again an idea that private sector was told, you develop small scale industries, consumer goods like clothes, shoes, televisions, etc. Even though televisions and all were not produced at a massive level in India in those days, but it would be mostly on smaller consumer goods. All right, food processing, small electrical appliances. This would be developed by private sector, like light bulbs and all, by private sector. Labor intensive technology and small scale industrialization. So it was thought that government can focus on large scale industries, government can focus on big scale of production, capital intensive, and in the meantime, private sector can be the supplier of consumer goods and they can produce at a small level, employing more number of people. That was the basic idea with which private sector was introduced. Next point, you write, licensing was introduced to restrict entry and assure that there is neither overproduction nor shortage of the products. nor shortage of the products. Understand this. Licensing as a process means only those companies can produce who have a license given by the government. That is called licensing as a प्रोसेस. सिर्फ वही लोग उत्पादन कर सकते हैं जिनको सरकार ने लाइसेंस दिया है प्रोड्यूस करने का. जिनके पास लाइसेंस नहीं है वो प्रोडक्शन नहीं कर सकते. Alright, those who don't have a license cannot produce. Those who do have a license can produce. That is licensing as a policy. Now the government introduced it with again a good enough idea. The idea was India is a country which has resource scarcity. Alright, भारत में resources की कमी है. तो कोशिश ये थी कि या तो सरकार प्रिडिक्ट कर दे कि डिमांड कितना होगा, अकॉर्डिंगली लोगों को लाइसेंस दे दें और डिमांड के हिसाब से प्रोडक्शन हो जाए. ऑलराइट, आई एम जस्ट रिपीटिंग माई सेल्फ इन इंग्लिश दैट गवर्नमेंट वुड प्रिडिक्ट हाउ मच विल बी डिमांड and based on that demand government will give license. Say for example I have to give license for this chair. I am a government, I expect 200 chairs to be demanded in the market. I give license to 5 companies asking them to produce anything between 35 chairs to 45 chairs. So they produce anything between 35 chairs to 45 chairs. Overall 200, 220, 190 kind of chairs reach the market. 200 is the demand projected by me. There is neither overuse of resource in making chair nor underutilization. Otherwise, there was a fear that if government puts no restriction, then people will overproduce luxuries which can give high profit and surplus of that, and may underproduce the necessities because of low profitability of those. So government said we will manage this production. इस पूरे मॉडल में एक ही दिक्कत है. In this entire model there is one problem. How will the government know how much will be demanded? Because demand is such a fluctuating thing. It changes on a particularly monthly basis, if not daily. And then people might, okay, the government can say, okay, that's okay. We can predict a range of demand and ask people to produce as much. Correct? But then government will have to be overactive to make sure that the market is now restricted to 2-3 people who have the license, and these people should not start manipulating the market. In those days it was thought that with good bureaucratic control and control of public sector, government will make sure that private sector does not manipulate the market. But unfortunately by 1970s exactly these problems started coming back to haunt us. 1970s आते हुए यही दिक्कतें आने लगी कि लोगों ने मार्केट मैनिपुलेट करना शुरू किया, घूस देना शुरू कर दिया, जानबूझ के प्रोडक्शन कम करते थे, ब्लैक मार्केटिंग होने लगी. सो ऑल दिस स्टार्टेड बिकमिंग अ चैलेंज इन द कंटेक्स्ट ऑफ थिंग्स. ओके, देन यू राइट, yes. Completely. We were, see, India had majority tilt towards socialism right from the beginning after independence, because socialism was the in thing in those days. There are always philosophies which dominate a time period. 1940s, 50s, 60s was a time when socialism as a philosophy was very dominant, and people used to believe that this is the way forward. Like imagine even France, which was supposedly a capitalist country, had public sector enterprises. Americans allowed trade unions. Americans allowed labor rights larger than what they had ever allowed. So, even if countries were not socialists, they were waking up to the fact that you need to give your people these rights, etc. Then go back to India's independence history. So we had become independent fighting the British exactly for the same clauses, no, equality for all, rights for everyone, and so on. So it was very natural for Indian leaders of those days to believe that socialism is the policy they would like to follow. You see that? So we were heavily tilted, and then add to that the influence of Soviet Union on us. That again, we theoretically were matching them. So that was the reason we were tilted towards socialism, no doubt about it. All right, then you write below that, now it's not a feature, it's an evaluation of the plan. You write below that, second 5-year plan targeted growth rate, second 5-year plan targeted growth rate of 4.5% per annum 4.5% per annum. Per annum means every year. And achieved and achieved 4.2% per annum in spite of a recession in 1957-58. Remember, we will keep calling it 1972-73, 57-58 because India's accounting year stretches from one year to another. Like right now we are in the accounting year 2023-24. Isn't it? Starting on 1st April 23, continuing till 31st March 24. So when I say 1957-58, it means it's starting on 1st April 57, going till 31st March 58. This was the first recession that India faced. Recession means GDP starts falling. All right. So you write first recession in 1957-58 due to foreign exchange crisis. Due to foreign exchange crisis. See, foreign exchange crisis means when you don't have enough money to pay for your imports or pay the loans that you have taken from abroad. जब आपके पास विदेशी मुद्रा इतनी ना हो कि आप अपने विदेशी खरीदारी को या फिर जो लोन आपने लिए हैं उसे वापस कर पाएं, तो उसे कहते हैं foreign exchange crisis. When you don't have enough foreign exchange to pay for imports or to pay for loans taken from abroad, that is a crisis of foreign exchange. So India had this crisis for the first time in 1957-58. All right. Why did we have this crisis? We were importing food, so we had to pay for our food imports. That was one reason of crisis, that India had a drought in 57-58. So food imports were higher. And after the second 5-year plan of 1956, we started importing a lot of raw materials to industrialize quickly. And that meant again the import bill of raw materials increased quite a lot. So effectively it meant a lot of import bill without having the money to pay for that. And that created the foreign exchange crisis of 57-58. All right. Then, in fact, एक बात और ध्यान रखना, we were heavily dependent in those days on World Bank, IMF to get us money because we didn't have foreign exchange reserves. So Americans who effectively controlled these institutions would times and again delay the release of money to us to make us realize which side we should be on in the Cold War. Understand that also. You know, ये भी होता था उन दिनों में खूब normally. कि अमेरिकन जैसे 57-58 में क्या किया उन्होंने, जो वर्ल्ड बैंक का लोन आने वाला था उसे 4 महीने से डिले कर दिया. The World Bank loan that India was about to get, they delayed it by 4 months. Once the crisis got created and we had to pay out of our skins, we had to plead to them, please release the money, we need to pay it back. After they did all this, then they said yes, next time we will make sure you don't suffer because of it. We create a specific institution. So within the World Bank in 1958, they created a specific institution called Aid for India Forum. That's nothing to be proud of. That was recognizing us as an international level beggar. That, you know, this country will need money all the time, so let's create a forum for them. Thankfully that forum was then renamed and closed down in 2002 as India Development Forum because we stopped taking aid from World Bank in 1999. But that was what the Americans used to do. So that also used to create foreign exchange crisis in India. You would see that our second foreign exchange crisis happened. I will make you write that right now. The second foreign exchange crisis happened in 1966-67. Quite close to India-Pakistan war, where Americans were on the side of Pakistanis. You see, so Americans would play this trick. You know, that whenever India would go up and say that we don't support something, and they would say, okay, then we are not sending you this. And we would be struggling badly because we were dependent heavily on that money. All right, because we were not actually self-sufficient. All right. Then you write in the same point, industrial growth. और एक बात और तुम्हें हाईलाइट करना चाहूंगा, स्टैटिस्टिकली समझो, आई एम ट्राइंग टू हाईलाइट समथिंग स्टैटिस्टिकली टू यू. इफ average growth is 4.2% per annum over 5 years, and one of the years has been a recession, then it means that in the rest of the years, the country must have grown quite above 5% per annum. I hope all of us can notice that. All right, that in other years we must have grown at above 5%. That is why even though one of the year was a recession year, negative growth, still the average remained above 4%. That was showing a promising India. 1951 to 61, India remained among the top 3 fastest growing economies of the world. 51 to 61. We were continuously among the top 3 fastest economies of the world. In fact, there was a World Bank paper in 1959 which said that India is on path of becoming a developed economy by 1982-83. मैं ढूंढ रहा हूँ कौन थे वो भावनाओं से खिलवाड़ करने वाले. Anyways, jokes apart, no, the prediction was not incorrect. Actually, in those days, we looked very promising. Democratic institutions, growing faster, industrializing quickly, following the rule of law, stable government. So people thought, okay, this country is doing right things. So maybe another 20 years and the country will be on top. And we could have been, but again, we did some wrong things and they came back to bite us. And we will discuss that. But coming to this again, so you write within that, industrial development, industrial growth was above 8%. I'll just complete this and you can ask me. Industrial growth was above 8% compared to industrial growth with above 8% was above 8% compared to British period, when it was never above 2% per annum. When it was never above 2% per annum. Okay. I have another question from one of your friends who says how China with communism managed growth at a high pace for 2 decades. When China left communism, then they managed growth. Understand that. Chinese were a typical communist nation under Mao. Until Mao was alive, they were competing to be the poorest country in this world. Of course with us. That who will be poorer. तो हम में रेस लगती थी, तुम ऐसे कैसे गरीब हो जाओगे, मैं गरीब होके दिखाता हूँ. तो हम दोनों आपस में रेस लगा के रखते थे. Chinese till 1978 had a per capita income lesser than India's. Then Chinese started liberalizing starting 1978 when Deng Xiaoping became the president or General Secretary of Communist Party in China. He kept the name communism because the Communist Party as a single party had to rule China. But imagine, look at Chinese today. How does a communist nation have billionaires? They call themselves communists, no? As you also suggest that they are a communist nation, how did they grow? Communism means from each according to his effort to each according to his need. No private property. Then who is Jack Ma? And what is a Tencent enterprise? So Chinese have the largest number of billionaires in Asia. They are communists only in name. Don't get fooled by names. मेरा नाम गरीब झा हो जाए तो मैं गरीब नहीं हो जाऊंगा. आप समझिए ये बात, इतनी अकल रखो, अब इतने बड़े हो गए हो सब लोग कि चाइना कम्युनिस्ट कंट्री है तो कैसे ग्रो किए. कम्युनिज्म छोड़ दिया उन्होंने. इनफैक्ट देयर वाज अ वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग इंटरव्यू ऑफ डेंग वेयर एजरा वोजेल आस्क्ड हिम दैट यू आर सेइंग चाइना इज अ कम्युनिस्ट कंट्री बट यू आर अलाउइंग ग्लोबल कंपनीज टू कम एंड डू बिजनेस इन इंडिया, इन चाइना. यू आर ऑल्सो अलाउइंग चाइना टू मूव टू अ मार्केट इकोनॉमी एंड यू आर लेटिंग चाइनीज प्रोडक्शन मूव टू अ कैपिटलिस्ट स्केल. सो इज चाइना अ कैपिटलिस्ट कंट्री और अ कम्युनिस्ट कंट्री? Deng gave her a smile, which was a very trademark Deng style. He gave her a smile and said, what does it matter what color is the cat as long as she is catching the mice? You know? And he would talk like this. Deng was a very intelligent person, an engineer by training. He was trained in France as an engineer, and he was a very intelligent person, and he knew exactly what to do to let China grow. And I will tell you Chinese growth story at a different point of time, but understand that Chinese left practicing pure communism, and then they grew tremendously. Pure communism is everything within the control of the government, no private property allowed, nobody will be allowed to trade in the country, everybody will be buying things directly from the government, or the distribution will be done by them, no trade with outside world, and there will be only essential commodities exchanged with countries outside. Otherwise there will be nothing done. That's pure communism as suggested by Marx, which is a 140-year-old theory, hence naturally outdated. Understand? I'm not saying that the thought is outdated. The theory is outdated. Marxian thought is still relevant. Marx was a wonderful intellectual. He understood what human beings live by. But if you try implementing something that was suggested 140 years ago, today, then you are living in a bad nostalgia. You know, that is the point. मेरे दादाजी एक तरह से जीवन जीते होंगे. अगर मैं उसी तरह से जीने लग जाऊं, तो मैं outdated हो जाऊंगा. समझना ही जरूरी है. मुझे उनके थॉट्स इंटरनलाइज करने चाहिए कि क्या सोच थी उनकी, पर मेथड्स तो मुझे नए बनाने पड़ेंगे क्योंकि दुनिया बदल गई है. मेथड तो अलग हो गया. Marx had not seen a joint stock company. Marx had not seen a welfare state. Marx had not seen powerful trade unions. Marx had not seen the blue collared workers, CEOs, etc. So Marx had his theory in one particular domain. Why love him so much that you forget the domain also? So that is my point. So communism as an idea is great. The thought process is wonderful, but we will have to understand how to achieve that in the modern world, given the constraints of the modern world. Do I believe you all be clear on that? All right. Let's see this. There's one more thing. One of your friends advises me not to dictate things which are in the book. It's a big syllabus. I have this advice for all of you. You leave the syllabus on me, and you leave the teaching methods on me. You focus on your training. Don't worry at all. I have been doing this since before you were born. मैं ये काम तब से कर रहा हूं जब आप जन्म नहीं लिए थे. और बिलीव मी, आपको नीचा दिखाने के लिए नहीं कह रहा हूं, कन्विंस करने के लिए कह रहा हूं. आप मेरे मेथड्स पे टिके रहिए. मुझे अपने मेथड्स पे इसलिए कॉन्फिडेंस है क्योंकि इन्हीं मेथड्स से पिछले 20-22 सालों से बहुत सारे टॉपर्स को ऐसे ही बैठकर आगे टॉपर्स बनते देख लिया है मैंने. तो मुझे कोई दिक्कत नहीं है ये समझने में कि आप भी बन जाएंगे, बिकॉज आई हैव सीन मेनी ऑफ देम सिटिंग लाइक दिस, confused or overconfident, suggesting things, not suggesting things. I am teaching something, they are thinking something else. All this they have also done. Passed out, become toppers, and believe me, I do nothing for which I will need you post you are an officer. मुझे फेवर्स की आपकी कोई जरूरत नहीं पड़ेगी, तो आपकी और मेरी दोस्ती यही इंटैक्ट रहेगी. कि जो आज हो गई. We are friends today, have trust, let me do things my way, and you just keep studying well. That's all that I need to do from you. तो मत एडवाइस करो कि मैं कैसे पढ़ाऊं. आपसे विनती है मेरी, आप जब हाथ पकड़ के चलना सीख रहे थे, मेरी पीएचडी खत्म हो गई थी उस वक्त. वो भी तब मान रहा हूं जब अगर आप मानो कि आप 98 या 99 बॉर्न होंगे. My PhD was done in 2001 and I've been seeing all these toppers in the last 17, 18, 19 years. तो मैं generally suggest करूंगा with all humbleness कि अपने suggestions मत दो इन बातों पे कि मैं पढ़ाऊं कैसे, वो मुझे मैनेज कर लेने दो. तुम बोलोगे ना, फिर मेरे मन में confusion आ जाएगा. हाँ ठीक ही कह रहे हैं, चलो डिक्टेट नहीं करता हूँ, फिर नहीं करूंगा, फिर बोल दूंगा सारी बातें. बुक में हो सकता है उनमें से कुछ बात ना हो. Some of them may not be in the book. I speak everything. You may not note them down, and I don't dictate. End of the day, that question comes in the exam. You are unable to answer with all good feelings about me, no? I don't want to see that. All right? So have confidence. I've been doing it for very long. I am pretty decent in my job. I back myself on that. So don't worry at all. यही एक काम है जो मुझे लगता है कि मुझे आता है, और तगड़ा आता है. आप निश्चिंत रहिए बिल्कुल. इसीलिए आप देखेंगे मैं रील नहीं बनाता हूं. मैं पढ़ाने में विश्वास रखता हूं. मैं रील बनाना, 5-5 मिनट की बात करना नहीं. आप देखेंगे मेरे वीडियोस भी जो यूट्यूब पे हैं, वो सब 1-1 घंटे, 1.5 घंटे, 2-2 घंटे के हैं, क्योंकि उसमें भी मैं पढ़ा रहा हूं. तो आप चिंता ना करें, मैं पढ़ाऊं कैसे ये मैं संभाल लूंगा, आप पढ़ें कैसे वो भी मैं संभाल लूंगा, आप बस पढ़ने पे ध्यान लगाते रहिए। आपने बहुत पैसे खर्च किए नेक्स्ट आईएएस के लिए, अपने दिमाग को आईएएस के लिए बचा के रखो। मेरी तरफ मत लाओ अभी, पूरी विनती है मेरी ये आपसे हाथ जोड़कर। ऑलराइट, लेट्स सी दिस देन। ये Okay, as said by Wung Shu is one of my very good friends. He teaches at Tianjin University. He says, thankfully for China, Mao died. You know, now after Mao died, what the Chinese did first up is they started changing the cooperative system. Earlier, everybody's land was of cooperative. You produced, all your production was taken by cooperative, and then you took and then the distribution was done by the cooperative. And everybody had a target that you have to put this much in the cooperative. What Deng did was, he said, he first reduced the target by almost 25%, and then said that if you produce anything beyond the target, you are free to sell it in the open enterprise. So that became an incentive for the farmers to start producing more. Yes, Deng was the person after Mao. So they knew that if we produce more, we can sell in the market, make money. So private incentives started coming in. So they had to contribute to the cooperative, but then they could produce more beyond that. Other than that, he also established town and village enterprises, TVEs. He said that every town, every village, the public sector enterprise will be meant for people of that area. So whatever profit this enterprise earns will be reinvested in this area alone. Suddenly the people started taking more interest. The workers started working better because they knew that whatever extra we create will be spent on our benefit only. He also established special economic zones, places like Shenzhen, places like Guangdong. So these were places he established where he said that foreigners can come in, manufacture in these places, produce in these places, sell abroad, and 0% import duty will be charged. And Chinese company will also establish there. So that way the Chinese started learning the tricks of the foreigners. And by the time it was 1990s, he then opened up China for globalization and said that now we are willing to export to the world. In the meantime, because their labor laws were relatively flexible, workers were very cheap, infrastructure had been developed by Deng in all these years. So that meant by 1990s, China became the manufacturing powerhouse supplying to the world. And of course, they got a lot of help from Americans, whom they had kind of indirectly convinced that if you help us, then who knows in future we can be a democracy. So Americans had this dominant thinking. Also, don't forget one more thing that the Chinese could, or Deng especially is held responsible for. Deng understood that dictatorships are in danger because of the single ruler whom people look up to, and people then start feeling bored of that ruler. So Deng introduced something very interesting that Xi Jinping has now removed, because Xi Jinping is the beginning of end of Chinese growth. I can tell you that. जितने इंटेलिजेंट डेंग थे उतने ही मूर्ख शी हैं. इसमें कोई डाउट ही नहीं है. 20 साल बाद आप भी रहेंगे और मैं भी रहूंगा, आप इसको ट्रू होते देखेंगे जो मैं आज आपको बोल रहा हूं. So what Deng did, he said that every 10 years, ranging from the president to even the block level head of Communist Party will be changed. Now that was anti-incumbency that democracy gives you by the ballot power. That I can vote and I can remove the government. Deng said every 10 years people in government will automatically change. So the president in 1981 will be changed in 91, prime minister, foreign minister, ranging till even block heads of Communist Party. It had two benefits. Benefit one, people felt that okay, these guys will go away. So by the time people used to feel bored by these people, 2 terms, 5 years, these guys would go away, new will come, and the new will say, no, we will do right things and we will help you out. But equally importantly, even those who were in power understood that corruption cannot be done beyond a point, because we will be definitely gone 10 years later and somebody new will come in and we can be caught big time. So that made the Chinese system efficient. He went for export orientation, opening up China, connecting China to the world. And that all started from 1980s. So there is a lot of story about it. There are many good books on China that you can surely read. Not now maybe, but over a period. And you would realize that Chinese did many things correct because Deng had a vision of how to let China grow. And that was what created. He focused on growth in rural areas. He focused on infrastructure development. He focused on education and healthcare. So he made people strong. And that meant that growth became more robust. That was the idea. Of course, they had a stroke of luck also. That stroke of luck was that from 1991, the world started globalizing and demand for commodities increased tremendously all over the world. And since Chinese were one of the larger producers, they automatically got benefited by that. Which we also got benefited, no doubt, because we were the large producers of service sector. So if you will see India's IT industry, India's banking sector, India's telecom sector, we have done very well in those sectors in the last 30 years. Again, globalization has played a big role in that. So countries also get lucky sometimes when they do the right step. Yes, India had top-down approach, urban, service sector, first the educated people, and many were left uneducated, while Chinese went bottoms up. And again, that was because Deng understood that unless you don't make reforms in the rural areas, you will not be able to make your reforms acceptable to all. Because the growth has to go to the rural areas. Of course, one thing we should not forget, China had an advantage in the negative sense I'm saying, not positive, but they had an advantage that they could bulldoze their people. Whenever somebody says, oh, why India cannot do things that China does? Because India cannot fire tanks on its students. And India should not. And we should be proud of that we are that country. Chinese could do a Tiananmen Square 1989, firing tanks on their own students who were protesting against the authoritarian government. So thankfully India doesn't do it. If we send even a police to a university, it becomes a big issue in India. And I'm happy of that. I'm not complaining at all. Whenever somebody tells you, look, dictatorships do better than democracies because China did better than India, restrict them on 2 points. दो बातों से challenge करोगे उनको. Number one, China did better than India, but there were other dictatorships like Iraq, like Libya, like Democratic Republic of Congo, like North Korea, like Nigeria. What did they do as dictatorships? So why highlight a single dictatorship and say that they did better than India? On the other hand, there have been many democracies which have done pretty well for themselves, like United States, like France, like Germany, like England, like South Korea. So they have done pretty well for themselves. So why do we believe that dictatorship is necessary for people to do well? And second reason why we can restrict them by saying is, India's problem is not democracy. India's problem is lack of democracy at grassroots level. We are lacking in grassroots democracy. Grassroots democracy means that you go down to the least person and they should have a voice in the country. And that is the missing link in India. So we are not a complete democracy as yet. So rather than blaming democracy, let's go for more democracy. That is the idea. If we go for more democracy, decentralized governance, people getting to vote at the grassroots level, party cadres developed at grassroots level, party heads selected from district workers. आप सोचिए ग्रासरूट डेमोक्रेसी क्या करेगी? मैं और आप पार्टी अफिलिएशन ले, जिसे भी सपोर्ट करते हैं, अगर हम करते हैं तो we take affiliation in a party, then I should have a voting right at least to select my block head, and the block head should have a voting right to select the district head, and the district head should have the voting right to select the state head, and the state head should have the voting right to select the national head, and national heads can then campaign with each other, and then from block level everybody votes and chooses who will be the next head of my party. And then this head of my party is a nationally accepted person. Other parties can select in the same manner, and we can contest elections with each other. That's grassroots democracy. That's severely missing in India. We believe people who are sons and daughters of others are bound to rule. We believe in high command culture. State election हो गए 10 दिन तक चीफ मिनिस्टर नहीं बन रहे हैं, वो गुजरात हो या कर्नाटक, क्यों? हाई कमांड डिसीजन ले रहे हैं. ये ग्रासरूट डेमोक्रेसी मिसिंग है. ये आ जाए इंडिया में तो हम किसी भी डिक्टेटरशिप से बेहतर हैं. Thankfully, we were ingrained with democracy and we are a democratic country, and we should be proud of that rather than feeling in two minds that, oh look, the Chinese were dictatorial and they grew fast. Can we also do the same? No, we cannot, because China's growth was not because they were dictatorial alone. China's growth because they did many right things in their growth process, which India can do without actually choosing dictatorship. We have done some right things in the past. We can do few more. That is the aspect. I'll teach you that with structural reforms. All right, that is the idea. All right, then you write now below this. You write third 5-year. Yes, your question. I told you foreign exchange crisis. All right, you write third 5-year plan. This was 1961 to 66, and as I told you, this was the beginning point where we started struggling. The targeted growth in third five-year plan, targeted growth was 5% per annum, but the actual growth that we recorded was 3.6% per annum. You know, the targeted growth was 5% per annum, and the actual growth is 3.6% per annum. Now understand this, there were reasons for this happening. All right, there were reasons for this happening. The reasons typically were, so if we look at the reasons why this happened, one was severe drought experienced in 1965 and 1966. Don't forget, we were an agricultural dominated country, and now having two successive droughts and very severe droughts. In fact, we hardly had things to eat, and that meant that people were suffering badly on the ground. So obviously, and then the raw material for industry was missing. So all that meant that India did badly in these years. Then there was a foreign exchange crisis in 1965-66, leading to recession. Foreign exchange crisis in 1965-66, leading to recession. Recession again is fall in GDP. This was India's second recession. First was in 57-58, second in 65-66. So this was India's second recession. This is also called balance of payment crisis, because we were unable to pay for our foreign exchange requirements in these years. And again, the lack of payment was because of severe agriculture crisis, raw materials imported. Now understand this. If you don't have money to pay for foreign imports, that meant we did not have money to pay for our raw materials to be imported. And that meant we had the capacity to produce, but shortage of raw material meant we could not produce. You understand that? Factory थे, machine थी, raw material ही नहीं था जिससे production होता. तो capacity थी लेकिन production नहीं कर पा रहे थे. Then another reason was poor performance of private sector. Poor performance of private sector led to shortage of consumer goods. Poor performance of private sector led to shortage of consumer goods, and therefore inflation was high. Poor performance of private sector. So private sector was expected to produce consumer goods like shoes, clothes, food processing, toys, small electrical appliances. Now these things were in shortage, as they didn't perform well, and they didn't perform well because of various reasons, like not having good infrastructure, not getting raw materials on time, not getting government permissions on time, not having enough machines in place. So there the shortage was due to various reasons. अगर आपके मन में आता है प्राइवेट सेक्टर क्यों शॉर्टेज में क्यों नुकसान में जा रहा था, क्योंकि उसके अलग कारण थे. गवर्नमेंट की परमिशंस नहीं मिलती थी टाइम पे, रॉ मटेरियल्स की शॉर्टेज हो जाती थी, बहुत बार प्राइवेट सेक्टर को ट्रांसपोर्टेशन या अदर इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर की फैसिलिटी नहीं मिलती थी. सो ड्यू टू अदर things lacking like infrastructure, raw material, government permissions, etc., the private sector could not produce sufficient amount of consumer goods. Plus, remember, India's population was rising drastically and India's income was also relatively rising. So demand for consumer goods was rising. People wanted more clothes, more shoes, and so on. But the shortages were tremendous. And that created high inflation in India, hurting India again. In fact, these were the days when they created that culture also of the siblings sharing clothes, etc. ये उन दिनों की से कहानी बननी शुरू हुई इंडिया में. All right, that siblings are sharing clothes, boys and girls and all. तो ये वहां से शुरुआत हुआ कि हम बड़े होने लगे, कपड़े वपड़े पहनते थे, एक दूसरे के टॉयज से खेलते थे, वो सारा. ये अभी भी कल्चर चल रहा है हमारे देश में कि अब बड़े होते हैं तो अपने बड़े भाई के कपड़े पहन लिए. मैं भी ऐसे बड़ा होता था, अपने बड़े भाई के कपड़े दे देते थे मुझे. वो मोटे थे, मैं थोड़ा पतला था, तो उनके कपड़े मेरे ऐसे झूलते वूलते रहते थे, मैं अपना जिन की तरह घूमता रहता था. But that used to be the thing that in those days it became a cultural factor in India. Elder sons, and as I told you, I grew up like that. Elder sons, clothes given to younger son. Elder sons, bicycle given to younger son. When my elder brother was getting married, I was very worried. But thankfully better sense prevailed later on. But these were challenges of growing up in those days in India. And even today that exists, that you are given all the things from your elder siblings. So this is something that was due to this shortage that got created here. That as this shortage gets created, cultural events start happening or start taking shape. Apart from these three economic factors, there was a very important non-economic factor. The very important non-economic factor was political instability. This political instability was due to wars and due to frequent demise of prime ministers. All right. Pandit Nehru passes away May 1964. Shastri ji passes away January 66. So there was very frequent deaths of our prime minister. So that was the fourth but very important non-economic reason. That was political instability. Political instability. So, when you look at political instability, wars, 1962, 1965, and demise of prime ministers, 27th May 1964, Pandit Nehru passes away. And then again, 11th January 1966, Shastri ji passes away. And why is this an important factor? War, I am sure you understand that during a war, people divert the resources towards it. So obviously your capacity to develop the economy becomes limited. Death of a prime minister becomes very important in a country like ours. You know why? Because the country is controlled by government. Now if the prime minister, that is economy, if the prime minister dies, that means there will be a battle of succession. And 1 month, 2 months will go away in that. Then a new prime minister will be appointed. And another 3, 4 months, 6 months, the new prime minister will take in adjusting to the place, knowing all the things, understanding the nuances. So that meant we used to lose 5, 6 months in the year because of the prime minister's death. And this happened within 18 months, twice up. 18 महीने के अंदर 2 बार ही हो गया. तो 2 बार ऐसी हालत आई जहां हमने 2-2, 4-4, 5-5 महीने लूज कर दिए क्योंकि गवर्नमेंट ही स्टेबल नहीं थी कुछ दिनों के लिए. That becomes a challenge, that if a country which is running on planning, a country which is running on government decisions, a country which is running through bureaucratic control, and in that country if the prime minister is not there, becomes difficult to run it on a higher engine. That became a trouble in India, and 61 to 66 the problem remained. Just one thing you keep in mind, 1961 to 66 the policy was a continuation of Mahalanobis model. All right, 1961 to 66, there was no new model. It was a continuation of Mahalanobis model. Then the challenge came in the next time period, full blown. If you look at 1966 to 1980, it is called period of retrogression. 1966 to 1980, it is called period of retrogression, Retrogression means decline. तो ये टाइम पीरियड इंडिया के लिए एक्चुअली बहुत कॉस्टली साबित हुआ. I'll tell you a few things on this. The average GDP growth in this time period, 1966 to 80, came down to 3.3% per annum. Population growth in this time period was almost 2.5% per annum, which meant per capita income growth of India for a good 15 years was less than 1% per annum. In fact, it affected us so much that the entire per capita income growth from 1947 to 1979 was recorded at 1.3% per annum. It took us 32 years to double our per capita income. And this is what was called the Hindu rate of growth by economist Professor Raj Krishna. Hindu rate of growth by Professor Raj Krishna. Again, it had nothing to do with the religion Hindu. It had to do with India as Hindu. He called it the Hindu rate of growth. Frustratingly, Professor Raj Krishna was one of the very few liberal economists of 1970s. 1970s were the days of Mrs. Gandhi, and that would be dominated by economists leaning on the socialist side. So Professor Krishna was one of the very few liberal economists, and he would always say that reduce licensing system, give more freedom to people to do business, reduce the role of government in the system, reduce nepotism and corruption. So he said that India has social rigidity, people fight in the name of communalism and casteism. India has cultural rigidity, that people still don't take up jobs meant for all, like women are restricted from taking up a job, or caste becomes a factor in taking up a job. And India has economic rigidity, that is, government prohibits business from happening. So he said that due to all that, India's growth rate became one of the slowest in the world in per capita terms, that our population increased very heavily, GDP did not increase as much, creating resource shortage, and he gave it a name, Hindu rate of growth. Retrogression also because industrial growth was recorded at approximately 4% per annum, which was the slowest after independence. इंडिपेंडेंस के बाद इंडस्ट्री कभी भी 5% के नीचे ग्रो नहीं हुई थी. इस पीरियड में वो 4% पे आ गए. So it was the slowest growth after independence, industrial growth at 4% per annum. So these were the typical challenges we were facing, due to which we were calling this period as a period of retrogression. Alright, these were the challenges we were facing, due to which we were calling this period as a period of retrogression. Alright, now what were the reasons that this happened? We go into that what were the reasons that we had retrogression. So there were typical reasons for it, and bad policy was the major reason. But before I take you, yes. Yeah, in fact, the whole 20th century was a problem that way. 1900 to 1947, we were growing at less than or almost 0%. 47 to 79, 47 to 61, we were growing at above 4%, but then the population was also growing at 2.5 odd percent. So that was 1.5% growth. And in this period, population was growing and GDP growth came down. So overall, the growth rate comes down to 1.3%. You mean for 51 to 66? That is what? That the per capita income growth was less than 1%. You see? So that implies that our growth was suffering overall. That was the challenge we faced. Now, and remember, per capita income means average income of the country per person, how much extra you are producing. So if that is below 1%, that shows hardly any production happening. I need you to see one thing actually before I take you into analysis of why this happened. Give me a minute, I'll take your question. What I need to see you, show to you, is this. 1966 to 1969, there was no plan in India. It's called Plan Holiday. Government used to call it annual plan, but actually there was no plan. Government would call it annual plan. सरकार ने एक नाम दिया एनुअल प्लान. सरकार बोले हम हर साल प्लानिंग करेंगे देश के लिए, 5-year plan अभी नहीं बनाएंगे. We will not make 5-year plans. We will do planning on an annual basis. Major reason was the conflict on appointment of planning commission. I'm sure all those of you who understand the political history of India would know that 66 to 69 was the time period when Mrs. Indira Gandhi on one side and syndicate in the Congress on the other, K. Kamraj, Morarji Desai, etc., were fighting a battle to establish their supremacy in the Congress. So obviously nobody had time to do these things like planning. So they said, okay, let's postpone planning. We'll see it later. Let's first see what we can do to establish ourselves. Now, then 1969 to 1974 was the fourth 5-year plan. This was also called Gadgil plan because it was given by Professor D.N. Gadgil as the Deputy Chairman of Planning Commission. So this was Gadgil plan, and for the first time in this plan, people introduced talks on poverty alleviation, that is direct attack on poverty. So first time things were being talked about, that there will be direct attack on poverty and we will try removing poverty from India. For the first time also there was a talk on employment programs, that we will work for employment development in India. And for the first time also there was a talk on decentralized governance. These were things that were talked about. Decentralized governance, employment orientation, poverty alleviation. So India started talking on those terms quite a bit. Then again, 1974 to 1977, fifth 5-year plan. Again, see, the plan did not complete its 5 years. This was supposed to be from 74 to 79, ends in 77. Why? Because the government changes. Mrs. Gandhi lost elections in 77. She was replaced by Janata Party government. But again, Janata Party government itself was not stable. Morarji Desai ji for around 13 odd months, followed by Charan Singh ji for 7-8 months. So that meant that they made a plan. In fact, they cancelled this plan and they said that we will have a sixth 5-year plan from 77 to 82. A sixth 5-year plan from 77 to 82. But the government fell in between, and 1977 to 79 is what was called rolling plan. But the reality was, again, there was no plan. सरकार ही एस्टैब्लिश नहीं थे तो प्लान क्या करेंगे. ये सब नाम दिया जाता था प्लानिंग की इज्जत बचाने के लिए, क्योंकि एक आइडियोलॉजिकल बेसिस बनाना था ना कि प्लानिंग एक अच्छी चीज है, करते रहना चाहिए, तो कैसे उसका नाम खराब होने देंगे, तो कुछ कुछ नाम रख देते थे, रोलिंग प्लान, एनुअल प्लान. बट एक्चुअली दीज इयर्स वुड हैव नो प्लान. नाउ इमेजिन 5 out of 14 years have no plan, emergency in one of the plan period, and only one 5-year plan could complete its tenure. सिर्फ एक ऐसा 5-year plan हुआ जिसने 5 साल पूरे किए, और कभी या तो 5-year plan था ही नहीं, या हुआ तो उसने अपने टाइम पूरा नहीं किया. That was the disturbance India was going through. That even 5-year plans were not completing, they were not happening. Politics became very dominant. JP movement in 1974, Mrs. Gandhi imposing emergency in 1975. Most importantly, India becoming heavily polarized in 1970s. Either people would love Mrs. Gandhi a lot, saying things like Indira is India, India is Indira, and otherwise they would hate her a lot. Indira hatao, desh bachao, So in all that process, even when Mrs. Gandhi would take a right decision, she would be criticized, and even by her opponents. And even when she would take a wrong decision, she would be praised by her sycophants. So, that became a problem part. And I'm sure you can understand this situation easily, because today we are living a similar domain. Mr. Modi is a similarly polarizing figure. People who love him believe that he is the next incarnation of Lord Vishnu. People, and People who don't love him are those who believe that he is a curse to the nation. That extremity hurts you. Because you may be talking economics, you may be talking sociology, you may be talking geography, but people are listening everything politically. Because everybody is living a surcharged life. So by chance, one day you say that, look, there has been good growth in exports in the last 2 years. Oh, this looks like a Modi supporter. Another day you say that, look, demonetization was a very bad policy. Oh, this fellow came out to be urban Naxal. This is something we need to guard against, but that's the problem that happens when leaders are polarizing in nature, that people either are, and remember, it's not only the central prime minister which would be like that. You would see that in these periods, even in 70s India's political history you check, you will get a lot of names where even chief ministers would become very polarizing. That people would either love them a lot or not love them at all. Even in today's India you would see that even chief ministers are very polarizing. Then it becomes, please understand this point, then it becomes a personality-centered economy rather than a policy-centered economy. And that is what hurts you. Because when it is a personality-centered economy, then everybody is thinking about who is the personality who took the decision. And I will oppose or support based on the person, not on the policy. So personality-centered economies always suffer. It's the policy-centered economies which do well. I talked so much about Deng to you. Imagine, Deng would hardly make public appearances. He was always behind the scene. Because he didn't want to get public glare on him, which would then again change the whole perception about him or China. He would always remain behind the scene, but keep doing his work very efficiently. And that is, again I repeat, the key factor. Behind the scene people are sometimes more efficient because then they don't let the politics become personality centered or the economics become personality centered. अब सोच के देखिए, फार्म लॉज की बात भी करूंगा मैं आपके साथ. फार्म लॉज अगर लाना है सरकार को तो स्टेट गवर्नमेंट्स ले आते. अगर प्रधानमंत्री उसके सपोर्ट में थे, if the prime minister supported farm laws, the central government could have brought a model law suggesting to the states that this is what we suggest can be very good for you. And those states which are ruled by his party, in those days there used to be 16, could have introduced these laws. And as the benefit of these laws would have gone up, everybody would have seen it, and then you could, and people would have experienced also that what are the problems observed in these laws, implementation, and then we could have thought about a pan-India implementation. But that would have meant that Prime Minister has to take a back seat. He doesn't have to be in the forefront. You don't have to be in the forefront always. I want to get the job done, I'll get the job done. That is my point. So unfortunately we didn't do that. And even though farm laws could have done well for India, but it became such a polarized thing and so much of noise was created regarding that now that has thrown Indian agriculture at least 10 years behind the curve. And especially our farmers. And remember one more thing. The tallest leader of any country sets the tone of that country. When Prime Minister is acrimonious, if Prime Minister is battle hard, then your opposition also starts becoming battle hard and starts talking the same level of nonsense that they would expect you to talk if you are in opposition. And that's what we see happening in India even today. I'm on record telling you this. The opposition is talking a lot of nonsensical things which makes no sense, but they talk about it because they believe, okay, let's counter them by this kind of a nonsense. तो कुछ अजीब सी बात करेंगे, like India doesn't have a democracy. Rahul Gandhi ji goes out and speaks it, but when he wins in Karnataka, then there is democracy. He says BJP is controlling the election machinery, BJP is controlling the advertisements, the news channels, we are fighting a big battle in India, but then he lost Punjab to Aam Aadmi Party. And he lost Bengal to Miss Mamta Banerjee, not a single seat for his party. He lost Kerala to Communist Party. So he should realize that maybe the problem is him rather than controlling media, etc. So understand that, and I'm not into politics of it, so you can keep your politics. I'm telling you that once it becomes that nefarious, that the leader of the principal opposition party is also talking nonsensical, and that also on a foreign land, then you are in more trouble. Because then the hope regarding somebody bringing semblance goes away. क्योंकि सरकार तो कुछ कुछ अजीब हरकत कर ही देते हैं, जैसे demonetization. One of the worst policy paradigms I could imagine. It should not have been done. Okay, maybe a mistake, then should have been accepted as a mistake. We keep fighting for that also. No, the Prime Minister showed intent by bringing demonetization. It was a message to everyone. Well, if I cut my legs, I will lose my weight, no? That also shows intent. Look how intentful he was. No, I can run with the legs and reduce my weight. So it was a bad policy, but unfortunately nobody evaluates it today. And even people evaluating it today have changed the goalpost. They said, look, demonetization has created digitalization of Indian economy. I don't disagree at all. But was demonetization announced by the Prime Minister on 8th November for digitalization or for removing corruption from India? And he continuously kept talking for removing corruption from India, and corruption exists in India even now. तो डिमोनेटाइजेशन ने करप्शन तो हटाया नहीं. और अब जब 2000 के नोट को हटाया जा रहा है देश से, तो लोगों ने कहा देखो जो लोग पैसा रखे हुए हैं करप्शन से, उनका पैसा खत्म हो जाएगा 2000 नोट हटाने से. पर वो पैसा तो शायद खत्म हो गया था 2016 में. सारे करप्ट मारे गए थे उस वक्त, उनको बहुत नुकसान हुआ था. और अगर 7 साल के अंदर वो सारे करप्ट वापस इतना पैसा इकट्ठा कर लिए, तो आज आप 2000 के नोट हटाएंगे, 2030 तक वो वापस पैसा इकट्ठा कर लेंगे. क्योंकि इन सब के पीछे सोच ही गलत है. द होल थॉट प्रोसेस इज रॉन्ग. ब्लैक मनी डजंट क्रिएट करप्शन, करप्शन क्रिएट्स ब्लैक मनी. सो हिट ऑन द रूट कॉज ऑफ करप्शन रादर देन हिटिंग ऑन ब्लैक मनी और कैश. वो पिक्चरों में विजुअल इफेक्ट के लिए दिखाते हैं कि अलमारी खोला, उसमें कैश रखा हुआ है, ये देखो जितना लेना है ले लो. ऐसा रियल वर्ल्ड में बहुत ही रेयर होता है. कुछ लोग हैं बहुत बड़े लुटेरे हैं. There are many robbers in India, but in real world it's very rare. People park their black money in real estate. People park their black money in gold. People park their black money abroad. They've kept all sorts of black money like that. You know what is the best way to talk about removing black money in India? If the Prime Minister or the opposition, and none of them talk about it, that's the very interesting part. But if any of them talk about making political funding white, कि ये कानून लेकर आएंगे कि पॉलिटिकल फंडिंग व्हाइट में होगी, जो फंड आपको मुझे कंट्रीब्यूट करना है आप डिजिटली ही कंट्रीब्यूट करेंगे. 1 रुपया भी कंट्रीब्यूट करना है तो डिजिटली कंट्रीब्यूट करिए, आपसे करेंसी नोट में नहीं लेंगे पैसा. तो कुछ इस तरह के ऑडिटिंग के प्रॉपर फंडिंग रिपोर्ट्स लेकर आए. हु ऑडिटिंग ऑफ द रिपोर्ट्स. So make political funding transparent. One big cause of corruption will go away. It will make Indian politics quite clean. Neither the opposition, none of them, whichever state you talk about, whichever party you talk about, nor the government ever proposes it. They keep saying ये सरकार अदानी अंबानी का सरकार है. तो लॉजिकल क्वेश्चन क्या होना चाहिए कि ठीक है जब आप आएंगे तो ऐसा क्या करेंगे कि आगे कोई भी सरकार भारत में पूंजीपतियों की ना बने. हम वो सवाल नहीं पूछते, हम अपना झंडा लेके नाचते रहते हैं. हाँ ये सरकार अदानी अंबानी की, मैं नहीं बनने दूंगा, तुम्हारी आ जाओ. That is the challenge in India, if you ask me. That if you are saying this government is Adani Ambani's government, even for a second if I grant it, even though Ambanis have been the richest in India since 1983, saying that this government is Ambani's government is quite a moot point, you know. But even if I grant that, the logical question as a citizen from my side is, okay, even if I believe this government is Adani Ambani government, what rules will you bring about as you come into government so that no future government can be made by industrialists or capitalists in India? They don't talk about that. They just put allegations on each other and cross allegations. We are the fools who keep running those Twitter battles on their behalf. Because we are ideologically governed at times. So that is the challenge in India today. And that is why last 10 years we have not grown very high. We have grown decent, but not very high. This was the challenge in 1970s, and we hardly grew in 1970s. That is the bottom line of the story I wanted you to understand, that when politics becomes acrimonious, understand this, when politics becomes acrimonious, then mutual trust becomes low. We start not trusting each other. And when mutual trust becomes low, and mutual respect becomes low, then efficiency goes down. Because any contract, any business, any economic development is a big function of mutual trust. अभी थोड़ी देर पहले आपके एक दोस्त के बात पे मैं क्यों आपसे रिक्वेस्ट कर रहा था कि मुझ में फेथ रखो, क्योंकि तुम्हें मुझ में फेथ रखना ही होगा अगर तुमने मुझे चूज किया है एज योर कोच. If I am teaching you by one method and you are looking into things from another method, then 1 year later we are contradicting each other. मैं तुम्हें बोल रहा हूं ये बेसिक बातें रिवाइज करो 2 बार 3 बार, और तुम कहते हो कौन सी और अच्छी वाली किताब पढ़ूं मैं. तो फिर हम 2 अलग अलग प्लेन पे गा रहे हैं ना गाना. मैं गाना गा रहा हूं मार दिया जाए कि छोड़ दिया जाए, तुम सुन रहे हो ले गई दिल गुड़िया जापान की. तो फिर तो खतरनाक हो जाएगा मामला. We can't be singing and hearing 2 different songs. We got to hear the same thing. That's faith, that's trust. Politics is also about that. Economics is about that. The whole economy works on that, and then it does better. So that is what was missing in India big time in 70s. For various reasons, but I told you few. In today's India also, to a great extent it is missing. And we need to build that up. All right, now, yes, sorry. The very slow rate of growth that we had, this. 79. Before what? 47? 0%. I told you that, no, yesterday. 1900 to 1947 was 0% per capita. But this was also hardly any per capita income growth when other countries were growing at 3.5%. All right. Now No, actually the period of retrogression was 66 to 80 because the average came down because of the very poor performance of 66 to 80. The average was above 2% between 47 to 66 per capita income growth, or around 2%. But that average got distorted only in 66 to 80 when the per capita income growth came below 1% due to high population and low GDP growth. Both things happening. All right, you write reasons for retrogression. Reasons for retrogression. You should be reading the next IAS book. You will get the marked chapters by tomorrow. I hope, Rakshit, you got the answer about plans. I have written it on the board. Expiry date on the note will not help again because you are taking people's confidence in the note. If you tell people there is an expiry date on your note and you have to submit it to the bank, then people will stop using the notes and they will find other ways to be corrupt. I mean, one more thing I'll let you know. We always attach corruption to money, attach corruption to power, attach corruption to control, attach corruption to abuse of your chair. All that is also corruption. If I am paying 10 lakh rupees for my son's donation, bribe, and getting him admitted into a college, corruption. But similarly, if I am a senior officer, I call up the college principal, and the college principal obliges me by taking my son into the college on one criteria or the other, so that I will help the college principal tomorrow if a need arises. That's also corruption. You scratch my back, I scratch yours. So corruption doesn't necessarily mean money alone. Corruption can be done in various ways in the country. तो अगर मैं अपने इन्फ्लुएंस से अपने बच्चे का एडमिशन करा रहा हूं किसी जेन्युइन बच्चे का सीट खाकर, तो वो भी करप्शन है जैसे मैं पैसे देकर एडमिशन करा रहा हूं. So corruption is not necessarily money alone. Corruption is a lot of other things that you need to understand. All right. In these reasons for retrogression, you write the first one. You write rigidity of licensing system. Rigidity of licensing system led to lack of competition and also promoted also promoted corruption and nepotism. This, became the first factor. Rigidity meant only the government could give license, and until the government doesn't give license, you could not produce. तो सरकार क्या करने लगे? सरकार में कुछ लोग लाइसेंस देने के पैसे मांगने लगे, because they knew that once you have the license, you have a control on the market. You will be one among the few producers, so people will be forced to buy from you. So now the people in the government said, give us money and then we give you license. Another problem arose was sometimes the government decision making will be delayed and the licenses were not given for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, creating shortages in the market even when demand increased. Also remember, due to licensing system, there will be 2 or 3 big players in the market, and that meant that these 2-3 players dominated the market and they were more interested in continuing and getting their license rather than on cost cutting, technological upgradation, quality improvement. They were not doing all that. And that made Indian industrialization an inefficient story. कि इनकी वजह से इंडस्ट्रियलाइजेशन क्या हुआ? Inefficient. क्योंकि लोगों का ज्यादा ध्यान लाइसेंस लेने में था, डेवलपमेंट पे कम. Do I believe you understand this? Second point then, you write, poor performance of public sector, poor performance of public sector led to slow growth of economy. Full stop. The poor performance was due to bad pricing strategy. I hope you recall a little while back I was telling you deliberately charging very low, lesser than the cost, which made them incur a loss. अगर आप कॉस्ट ऑफ प्रोडक्शन से भी कम चार्ज करेंगे तो लॉस में रन करेंगे, एंड यू कैन नॉट सस्टेन दैट. सो बैड प्राइसिंग स्ट्रैटेजी, overstaffing means having more people than what you need. That is overstaffing, having more people than what you need. All right, so what did overstaffing do? It increases the wage bill. जरूरत से ज्यादा वेज देना पड़ता है. And second, makes the workers irresponsible. सबको लगता है कोई और काम कर लेंगे. You understand that everybody thinks somebody else will do it. All right, so overstaffing, poor technological infusion, the technology chosen by public sector remained poor because government did not have the money to keep upgrading it. All right, and they were not earning profit, so technology remained backward. So poor technological infusion, lack of modern machinery, so research and development was suffering, purchase of modern machinery was suffering. Both of those things. Modern machinery, lack of efficient source of raw material, That was another challenge that the public sector faced. एक रूल बना था इंडिया में, आज भी वो रूल है, that public sector has to buy its raw material only from another public sector, and it is only when the other public sector refuses that they can buy it from somebody else. You understand the rule? that एक public sector उन्हीं से raw material खरीद सकते हैं जो public sector हो, और अगर एक public sector ने मना किया तो ही किसी और से वो raw material खरीदेंगे. But what was the problem? Now if I am Coal India Limited and you are, say, an electricity producing company, you will buy coal from me to produce electricity. If I don't supply good quality coal to you, or if I don't supply coal timely to you, then even if you are efficient, you will be struggling because of poor raw material supply. You understand that? And I am complacent because I know that you cannot leave me because of the rules that have been created. So I can afford selling you poor quality, I can afford selling you a little delayed, and that started becoming again a challenge. And in the same thing then you write, and lack of timely appointment of head of the institution. Lack of timely appointment of head of the institution. I'll tell you what I mean by that. Not appointing CEOs or not appointing CMDs on time. 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, the post will remain vacant. Nobody appointed. Now, what will that imply? If you are a headless organization, how do you decide quickly? You understand that? That became a problem. The autonomy was missing. Autonomy means freedom of decision making. For every small decision, the public sector will be dependent on the ministry. And that made them more and more uncompetitive. तो उसके वजह से धीरे धीरे पब्लिक सेक्टर की कंपटीशन की कैपेसिटी कम होने लगी, एंड दे स्टार्टेड रनिंग इनटू लॉसेस, दे स्टार्टेड मेकिंग रॉन्ग डिसीजंस, पुअर क्वालिटी प्रोडक्ट्स, एंड दैट इज वेयर अगेन इंडस्ट्रियलाइजेशन suffered. Do I believe you understand this? All right. We will keep the story till here today. I have to make you write 4 more points. I'll develop them as I see you tomorrow, and then we will go into the revival and so on, 80s to 90s and all that period. Thank you. I'll see you then. Okay, people online, I see you tomorrow 7:45.